And a second?
Ward, aye.
Turek, aye.
Thank you. Item 2, discussion of current proposed traffic on Bullock Street and possible mitigation. Is Penny here?
I see Penny here. Could we possibly move that down the agenda a little bit?
Okay, we'll move that down. We'll move it to item 3, update review on the secondary water study. Michael Shaw, Esquire.
I'm leaving. Thank you, Mayor. So we just wanted to give you a real quick update where we're at on the project. So I'll turn the time over to Dustin from Sunrise Engineering and let him go.
I was looking to see if I had Penny's number. Is there somebody here that could maybe contact her and see that? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Their numbers on the bottom of the
Oh.
sheet there. 215-6224.
I'll wait for an update from Kate.
Hopefully we're switching screens. My name's Dustin Schaefer. It's been a few months since I've been here, but good to be with you. That's not a good thing when my screen says alert. F1 key, try and reboot. What's that? Might have. I just want to reboot it while I'm starting here. Okay, we had her up. So like Mike said, we want to just give a brief update. We're nearing the completion of our analysis of the possible secondary water system. And so we want to give a report on where we're at, as well as a couple of items that we just wanted to run past you as a council. You see some of the options and potential questions that could come up in implementation. I think last time I was here, gave an update. We'd modeled a potential pipe network, just like you'd have your culinary system throughout the whole town. We've looked at phasing options, where the best place to start will be. We're going to show you, we've got phase one. Phase one we want to show in detail, then get into cost estimates, and then from there, cost of water, of what that means to the average user's water bill. And it's taking a little time here. Any questions while we're waiting? Has anybody come to the meeting with any questions on your mind? We'll probably cover them, but just thinking for a second.
Yeah, has anything changed that?
So yeah, not really any changes, but maybe just to review. So some of the implementation of a secondary water system, you're going to need obviously the infrastructure, pipelines, pump stations, storage reservoirs, and then in addition to that, you're going to need a source. You've got several options available. That's one of the things I think we talked about last time and we've looked into. You've got well number one right now that's up above town near Warm Springs. It's it's test pumped in the past at about 1,000 gallons a minute. So that's a good source for up here on the north side of the freeway. You've got in the field, you've got the springs that are currently being used for irrigation that could be converted and put into a pressurized system. And you've got the canal, St. George Fields Canal Company with options of purchasing and acquiring shares to tie into that system. That's water already in the fields. There's a few wells out in the fields, but the challenge with that, as well as the canal, is the water quality. Obviously, it's not good for drinking. That's why it's not there. But even for secondary use, it's not ideal and would require possibly some blending or treatment. And then you've got water from the Conservancy District via Sand Hollow Reservoir and their pipeline that you could tie into. And that's where some of our questions tonight are going to, and discussion is going to come into is those, especially out in the fields and the water from either the Conservancy District or Canal Company. There's some pros and cons to each of those. So this is just a snapshot of what the pipe network would look like in your city. Building out all of the current part of the city except for Coral Canyon is not shown there. What we're proposing is two initial phases would be the best, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, and the most logical place to start. Phase 1A, that we've named it, is primarily your downtown area where you've already got a ditch system, people that are used to using irrigation water for their own use. In addition, a storage reservoir would be required up above town, and by putting it, if you can see it up there at the top center, it's just below the 2 million gallon lower concrete tank that's a culinary tank that's up above the city. If you can, let me see my cursor right up here. A storage reservoir somewhere in this area. If you put that there, there's already some dry irrigation lines in in Brio and the subdivision right here, and so it would be relatively easy to.
You would have to pump lift it to that point, and then it would pressurize.
Yes. So well number 1 is located right about here, and so yes, you'd pump from well number 1 up to fill that reservoir, and then from there it would gravity flow to pressurize your system.
But well number 1 wouldn't be sufficient for that entire system.
Yes, it would. For that area right there, it would. And it would be part of future phases as well.
So everything we're seeing in purple right here, well number 1 would service.
Yes.
And the additional 2,000 homes that could go in there above Rio.
Yes, either that or potentially, a phase 2 or something. There's also some dry irrigation lines up here at the top end of Green Springs that would be another option to tie into fairly quickly. We don't have that in the first phase, but whether either the additional connections coming in above Brio or that area, eventually north of the river, you're gonna have to bring water from the Conservancy District or the canal or another source.
Do we treat water from the wells that are on Grapevine?
Grapevine, yes.
We do.
Yeah.
So that water could be secondary water.
It could. It's culinary right now. You're using it. There's not a lot of volume from Grapevine.
But there's been some discussion about Rockets.
Yes, right, correct. Yeah. The reason, the obvious reason we looked at this area first was because you've got so many people that already are used to using secondary water. It's a ditch, and we'd look at pressurizing that to hopefully conserve resources and provide a consistent flow. But that's the summary of phase 1A, and then 1B is in Washington Fields. This area, if you can see, this is Fields Road right here, and here's 3650 South. These subdivisions right here over the last 15, 20 years have put in dry irrigation line, and so the reason we've chosen this as potential phase 1B is the pipe network's already, a great deal of it's in the ground. There's still connections that would need to be made between subdivisions. There's a few subdivisions in the mix that maybe don't have the dry irrigation lines in them, but there's some savings as far as the network being there.
So we watered the golf course.
The Green Strings Golf Course.
It has its own well.
It's got its own well. Yeah.
It's really high in salt, so we
Yeah.
treat it so that it's usable.
So it's a secondary source. too.
Yes.
What am I actually seeing? The turquoise lines there, what is that a representation of?
That's representative of an irrigation system in
It
Washington
is-
Fields.
So it's the actual pipes that would be running on the streets? and
Yes.
People would tee off that.
Most of that's already. in the
Yes.
ground.
Yeah. Yep. Those are the actual pipes in the streets. And I believe it doesn't show it here, but those dry irrigation lines even have services, don't they,
To the house.
to the homes?
So from 2006 on, we required all new development to install dry irrigation. So the pipings in there were stepped out to make the road and service lines to the properties.
One of the questions we bumped up against is the water source in this area. And we've identified, two options that stand out there. I mentioned there's some wells that are real high in TDS salts that are tough to treat. They've got some challenges, and then the volume of, how much you're going to need for this many connections. It's an option, but we think that the two best options are either tying into the Sand Hollow system, pulling water from the Conservancy District, raw water from the Conservancy District, not treated or culinary, or acquiring canal company shares and tying directly into the canal system, which runs. I don't show that in here just for clarity, but that canal pipe, runs right through the middle of this area. So connecting to it wouldn't be too difficult. Let me just go through the pros and cons that we see in these two options.
So would the option depend, would that change where you would put, I'm assuming you'd have to put some retention someplace with any of them.
Yes, all of these will require some storage.
So
Yeah.
do your different options change where that retention is going?
Yes. Yep, exactly. So number one, I'll show you some cost estimates in a second, but tying onto the Conservancy District would mean running a pipeline from Sand Hollow Reservoir, or tying into the district's line out near Sand Hollow Reservoir, running that to a point in Long Valley and putting a reservoir approximately right here. That would give you elevation to provide gravity flow and pressure to the whole network. So the main component of that the reservoir has a significant cost to it, but the pipeline, large diameter pipeline from Sand Hollow through that reservoir and into the fields is the big cost item. And this option is by far more costly.
And what about the actual cost of the water itself?
And has the cost of the water, which is more expensive than the shares in the canal company. Yep.
Look at the canal, our canal company.
The St. George Fields Canal Company. Yeah. I mentioned the tie into the canal pipeline could be, there's a number of places along that canal route that are right near your network. The problem with that is so that makes it cheaper because the water's right there. You would need storage because the canal, there's usage still, there's still a demand on the canal and the shareholders that are there. And so when that water is available will fluctuate. Also, that water is not very good quality. And so you would want a detention basin, a reservoir where you could settle out silt or whatever you've got in there and have a buffer zone. And then because
You would do that after you pump it?
No,
put a
there's
reservoir-
enough pressure in the canal pipeline to connect and put that into a reservoir.
So where would you
settle-
put that?
Well, there's a number of options. I can't zoom in on this, but you know, where the canal kind of runs through 3650 would be a good spot. You'd be required to purchase land to put that on. There's a few other, you know, sites along there that could tie right into where we're proposing the network run. But once it went to the reservoir, settled out, then you would have a pump after that to pressurize the line, because you're at the same elevation as your network. So the benefits of the canal company option is the cost. The disadvantage is the quality of the water is going to be significantly lower, and you know, you've got to purchase land. The reservoir would be right there in the fields. The disadvantage, conversely, of the Water Conservancy District connection or source would be the cost. It's about double the cost.
Are you looking at like a retaining reservoir, or are you looking at a structure that you would store this water in?
It wouldn't be a covered, like your culinary tank's a covered tank or anything, but the reservoir for the canal tie-in, you'd probably want to have a concrete lined reservoir, because you're going to need to go in and maintain that and clean out the sediment periodically.
Does it have recreational possibilities at the same time?
Yeah, it would. I mean, I don't know that you want too many. You'd have too many fish, or I mean, it could be around a park or something, but it's not going to. The water quality is not great.
You could swim.
Yeah.
Paddleboat?
I don't know. I haven't been around the canal lately. Yeah, yeah. Now,
Sorry, just need to back you up.
Yeah.
Before that question, you were saying something was almost twice the cost?
yeah.
Can I just have you point me back to what that was?
So the option of running the pipeline from Sand Hollow, having the reservoir in Long Valley,
Oh, I
and
see what you're saying.
that option is
expected
about twice the cost of setting up a pump station and a connection to the canal. Yeah. But so the other factor that plays into this that's really out of your control is the Warner Valley Reservoir that the Conservancy District has on their radar. If that were to come in the next few years, I mean, you'd want to just use that and pipe it over. But from what we're hearing, being told by the district, that's 10 years away.
Well, the last word we got was they were moving that up, but it was only like a year, right? Wasn't that what you said? They were projecting to bring that forward, but it wasn't a significant movement forward.
You know, I met with Ron Thompson probably 8 months ago. He was telling me 10 years plus. I met with Zach Renstrom about 3 weeks ago, and he's saying, yeah, we're probably still about 10 years out, just with their factors issues with it. But we also had a conversation about this irrigation moving forward, and Zach understands the need for that. St. George really would like to bring source in as well. We've been talking with St. George. We're actually going to set up a meeting where St. George City, Washington City meets with the district to discuss irrigation and how we can provide a good irrigation source. The canal water, the problem is it's so brackish that you can't really use it. You've got really limited plants that you can use with it. Even if we could mix it in the reservoir in Warner Valley would pull the high winter water off, so it could be brackish, but it'd still be a very usable water. We're still moving down that road.
I believe St. George City has I think a few subdivisions, some fields and things that they water off of the canal source, but they're a little bit limited there as well. People would want to plan for, when they're planning their landscaping and whatnot, for tolerant type, plants and things that they'd use that for. Um,
There is a new pipeline going in that will be in, but it's culinary water, but that's a year, that was gonna be a year, I think maybe that's what it was, Douglas.
Yeah. Now, the connection to Sand Hollow, it is quite a bit more expensive, but the facilities that you would have there, the pipeline already goes right past Warner Valley. The reservoir site, you've got a developer out there that I think is interested in having that there. And so there could be some coordination on a site and that would be an excellent recreation type facility. So the facilities, even it's more at a more expensive option, but down the road when you do tie into the Warner Reservoir, most of those facilities would be used. So
I mean, for the notes, I just think the more we can contemplate multiple use,
Yeah.
given that our land is expensive and hard to access, multiple use just works, I think.
So I've just gone back a slide to the phase 1A. So this reservoir up above Warm Springs and above up on the Sittler property, that would be an excellent place for a recreational facility. Yeah. So here's kind of a summary of the cost estimates. The detailed breakdown will all be in the report. But 1A, that north of the old part of town, well number 1, all of that, the reservoir is about 11 million. The 1B option in the fields where you would tie into Sand Hollow is about 13.5, and the other option with the canal is about 6.6 million. I'm not getting into detail about future phasing or anything, but if you put the whole system together everywhere, all throughout town, we're estimating about 62 million. So it's a big chunk. It's a big bite. I did want to, so with these numbers, I know one of the big questions right from the get-go is what does it mean to our water use and our water rates? How could it work together? What does it benefit the citizens? So we've tried to summarize here. Right now, if you see that center column, your culinary water rate is average is about $36. You probably have some that are higher, and your base rate's $18.17, I think, $18.17. So you'll have some that are quite a bit lower. We project if you were to implement a secondary water system, the outdoor water usage that would be come off of your culinary use, it's not quite half. But it would amount to about $10 off of your average residential culinary rate. So you'd save about $10 on the culinary. We're projecting that the average total rate for an irrigation system is going to be about $37. And the reason that's so high is just the capital cost up front of getting that off the ground. That's the option of the Sand Hollow connection and Water Conservancy District water. And so that incorporates what Councilman Ward mentioned about the higher rates of the Conservancy District's water with that. So bottom line, the Conservancy District water option is about the combined water bill, culinary and secondary, would be about a $28 increase. With the Canal Company connection, about $16. That's a snapshot, day one. Over the years, that's going to go down because your connections that you add on, and when the capital when it's paid off in 20 years, you're going to be saving. And so I've tried to reflect that here in this slide. Yes, yeah, it reflects the district increases every year that they've planned for. So if I can walk you through this, the three columns here are different options of, we're wondering about a connection fee up front to get the irrigation system off the ground. If that can assess a connection fee to get that going. If that connection, so this column here on the left is if the city were to apply a $2,000 connection fee for the irrigation system, right now, as I was just showing before, it's a little over $28 of an increase between the two, culinary and irrigation
What's
rates.
our impact fee for water right now?
21 something, 21, 20. Yeah.
2,100?
Yeah. So in this scenario with the water concern,
Also
something like
with that, so on irrigation, when on a new home, you're paying the Conservancy District impact fee. It reduces that impact fee by, I think, 50% if you have irrigation provided by an entity. So they, on the new home, they would actually offset that connection.
Do we see that somewhere in this?
I don't have that in here, but we could get that in the report. I think it wouldn't be too hard.
But you have estimated the increase in water costs that are coming from the
Right.
Conservancy
It-
District.
Yes, the cost of water. Mhm. Yes.
Yes.
It would turn into a pressurized system and it would be a monthly fee. Okay.
Our proposal is to pressurize the whole community. Right.
But you're still on a water turn, so you have to turn those valves to run that in. I don't think we're really counting that as a pressurized system, but
It is
you're,
got- some of them have pressure,
Yeah.
but it's not a higher pressure.
Not a lot.
right.
Well,
Possibly, but you guys haven't considered that water yet.
Pardon?
You didn't consider that water in this scenario yet.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to come up and introduce yourself and
If
talk
we
about
pump
it.
well, if we pump well number one, that basically dries up.
So-
If we pump it full capacity. That's why the city put it using well.
And we've discussed, and that, we'll have that discussion in the report. If it doesn't completely dry those up, then it would be, we'd look to collect those at a single point and then pump those into the reservoir so they'd be used.
well, and, you know, part of the consideration is one, is like doubling cost, okay?
Yeah.
And the other is, do we predict in the future that we have a need to conserve water?
Right.
Okay, and that's another consideration. It's not, one consideration is cost, and the other consideration is, do we need to be able to conserve more water? We're gonna have water issues
Right.
in that future, and I don't know what your predictions about that are, or if you've made them. I suspect the
So-
Water Conservancy District's made them, but it should be part of this dialogue, I think.
Yeah. So it's reflected in the calculation of these numbers, but it's not showing that. But the average usage in Washington City right now is about 13,000 gallons a month. And you'd be reducing culinary,
Okay.
from the culinary system, that's
Okay.
indoor and outdoor use, you'd be reducing it by about 6,000, almost, not quite half.
Almost half
Mhm.
to go to secondary.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cost doubles, but the usage of culinary
Yeah.
goes in half, which is the conservation part of the discussion.
Right.
Which right now the state's getting very, very focused on conservation, and they're gonna actually come out with some rules that force communities into conservation, and if you don't, then there's penalties.
So those laws are they laws that will be,
They're working on right now, it's actually the governor's office.
so,
So they're very in the infancy right now. We're hoping that communities get a voice on that community, which right now there's no local communities on that community.
little bit about how we have to show affordable housing, but nobody can show it because we don't know who's going to buy it. A little bit like that.
Yeah.
But that could be waiting, last time I was a while ago. There's a contemplation of drafting something, at least for those of us in the Washington County Conservancy area, to have kind of a standard set of those local regulations. Are they now kind of putting it on hold to see if the governor's office is going to come out with something standardized?
Yes. And right now, they're talking about a mandatory 14% reduction in usage. If we don't hit that 14%, then there's penalties. But like I say, it's still quite in its infancy, and hopefully we get a voice on that here.
That the usage per household, per user?
Yes.
Okay.
So at 6 o'clock every night, we turn your water off.
I think part of that even, they're pushing for higher rates on the culinary too, wanting the city just to increase those to encourage conservation. Yeah. If you can just focus on this top left, the bottom here, 2020, so say we looked at a snapshot next year, it's an increase in the overall bill that your average customer would be paying of, $28. But 10 years down the road is 20. When those capital costs are paid off in 20 years, then you're starting to see, as you go further into the future, the benefit and the savings of having that irrigation.
I mean, we'd actually give money back.
Well, you'd probably adjust your rates to accordingly to reflect that. Yeah.
Nice.
That would be nice.
Yeah, that'd be different.
And I think we've seen this in other parts of the state, like Weaver Basin and whatnot, where they implemented something years ago, and now it's a reasonable water cost to their customers.
So you would forecast setting the rates to pay it off within 10 years? Is that how you adjusted those rates? Is to pay off that capital?
Most of your funding sources are going to be 20, 25-year type scenarios. Yeah. That's what we based that on.
Well, unless the state wants this badly enough to put some funds out.
That would be nice because I'll show on a slide here in a second. We've looked at several funding possibilities, and you'd think there'd be grant incentive and things like that to encourage
I think this would be a
saving culinary
good
water
thing
and
to put on our
irrigation.
list of
But
things we want to talk to our legislators about.
yeah,
But that hasn't been the way they've thought in the past. That has been something they've needed to be encouraged to get to.
The questions come up on the shares. This is just a snapshot of some. Sproul Spring, part of the list of irrigation or shareholders. There's a huge diversity in all. There's 5 different springs and networks: Westover, Sproul, Warm Springs, East, West, and Adair. And in that, there's about 184 total shares spread out over about 280 properties. You've got anywhere from people that have a tenth of a share to 4 or 5 shares, and so there's quite a diversity. One of the things that we've looked at, and actually we've modeled that if you were to say maybe say 1 share is equal to the connection at $2,000, or come up. I don't know that there's a direct correlation, engineering or administrative wise, to the dollar amount. We've associated that with the connection fee just for the analysis sake, and that would 123 shares at $2,000 a connection would be about $250,000 that the city would have to add to the finance. Well, it's part of the financing. So
In other words,
you wouldn't be getting those payments. Yeah. So we've seen some systems where not necessarily talking about the shareholders, but the customers at large, where maybe that connection fee, you have the option of paying it up front or financing it over 5 or 10 years or something with the city. That's oftentimes beneficial both ways, because the people can make it more affordable, and then there's an interest that helps with the the payments.
So
So
how would the city do that? Would you have to get a second loan in order to incorporate all of those in? Because the city, or you would just,
You just build it into the cost of the project.
Yeah.
And it's fairly insignificant when you look at the overall project.
it is. This last slide I've got here is just a list of some of the potential funding sources we've looked at. Like I said, it's actually been kind of disappointing. There's one I forgot that we don't have up here, and that's Division of Drinking Water. But as far as incentives like grant and maybe zero interest or really low interest loan, there's not a lot of options. Most of these are in the 2 to 3%, 20-year loan type scenario.
Does the five-county association take these kind of projects on?
So, they are normally, the two funding sources I know they work the most with are CDBG, which probably wouldn't apply very well to this. They're usually smaller numbers and they're federal.
Low income based.
Yeah. So
So you might be able to find,
the other one that they're very involved with is CIB, and they actually have a lot of money. It's just that it's loan. Most of their grants are going to be out in like Uinta Basin, carbon, in mineral producing.
Zero interest loan, isn't that what they?
They would
no, I think their
I-
current rate is about
About
2.
2.25 maybe.
Yeah, no, they don't ever do a 0.
Yeah.
What does CIB stand for?
Community Impact Board. Yeah. So, any questions?
Dustin, can you
Yeah.
jump back real quick to that where you were showing the rates?
This one or?
Yeah, no, that's it, the other one.
can you make sure the council gets a copy of this?
Sure.
So my question is this, and I just wondered if I could see my answer here, and maybe it's there, but I just can't really tell. With your culinary rates into the future, there's a cost to conservation. And once we shift people off of a culinary structure, you still have to now maintain a culinary structure. So what is a typical pattern that may happen is you have to increase rates in a culinary side to continue to maintain the same cash flow in order to provide the infrastructure.
Or be growing.
Is that anticipated here?
I don't think so.
I mean, I guess my question is, what is the impact of the culinary system's ability to be able to sustain the rates they are without raising them because of the quantity decrease, which is going to decrease cash flow in order to be able to maintain the system?
Yeah, that's a good question. Did you?
Maintaining the system, we're reducing the amount of water that we run through the system. Internally, leaves us a lot of room for growth in the system. And as well, we're not running the water out of the system like we would normally with the amount of gallons per home. So we would still see an increase in the maintenance costs. But I don't see that we're going to be drastic.
Well, I'd still like to see that because typically that's what's hoped for. But you have fixed costs that are not going to go below a certain line.
Right.
And once you start to remove, the revenue gets close to that line, then your only option is, because it's fixed cost, you have no choice but to maintain that line.
So these charts right here are boiled down from the cost of water analysis that we've done, and that you've got your culinary water structure that incorporates your fixed costs like you're talking about, and then your variable costs, and those correlate with your base rate and your overage rates, right? And so your irrigation system is really, it's going to mirror your water system fairly close. Your network's in the same streets, same type of valves and whatnot. And so,
Your cost of water includes maintenance.
yeah, well, it includes all that. And so we've had to, you have no basis for an O&M budget for an irrigation department right now. So we base that off of a percentage of what your water system would be or is right now. And so we used some percentages of the size of the irrigation system that you'd start out with in each phase, of the number of users that you've got, the number, the feet of pipe and whatnot that you're maintaining and all that. So we've used the water system budget and those O&M costs to reflect and predict what an irrigation O&M cost would be.
And it's a bit complicated, I get,
Yeah.
but I think at least it's good to be thoughtful about.
You're talking about, as you say, as you reduce the water you use, that the ratio of the O&M cost goes up relative to the amount of water.
Your revenue being generated is
Yeah.
drops, so your revenue generated stops, your own end costs are going up.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's, oh, well, yeah, you're using less, now we have to charge you
Yeah.
more because we got to maintain the
Yeah.
system. So it turns into a.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, if your charge goes up 7% for the M&O, but your growth is 7%,
That's what I was
is
just
that a
gonna say.
wash?
Well, that's what I
If-
wondered.
if-
Your
yeah.
growth is gonna keep you ahead of that anyway.
That's what I was-
But it would be nice to know those numbers before we.
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, good point.
Maintenance is gonna go up, but now our new infrastructure is gonna drop.
Right. Yeah.
Because we're gonna have an overabundance of infrastructure for growth to come.
Yeah.
So then back to the shareholders there, this is really just a proposal. And you're just kind of kicking around
I just-
some ideas as
just
far as
throwing
compensation for those that actually own shares. But as far as I'm aware, it's really the only proposal we've kind of put out.
Yeah,
there. haven't really
we think
put a-
it's reasonable that if you're making that connection fee, that's the cost to connect to it, to the system, that maybe that would offset one share, half share, whatever. We just need to dial in on what that equivalent would be. And then you could equate it with how many shares an individual or landowner had. Whether that's two.
And in my talking to some of the residents, the ones who would be most greatly impacted by this are those who have numerous amounts of shares
Mhm.
that would probably be much over and above their impact fees or their connection fees, and they're utilizing that for, watering, fairly large, you can almost not call them home gardens.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there as far as what you would want to do for them?
Well, no, something like that, if they're watering a large area, they might need more than one connection to water that large area. But we also talked about that, we did address that, maybe it'd be something, because we looked at the list and there's not a lot of people with over share.
Right.
No, it's not, but those,
There is,
I think
remember one that had 4 shares.
I think that was the most. That was what I was just going to say. 4 was about the most.
But, I mean, it's such a small number compared to the overall project. And we talked about maybe we just pay those shares, pay $2,000 per share.
I agree. I think some of those folks aren't, I mean, we've reached out a little bit. I don't have a full list of all the individuals impacted there. I just think some of them are going to be a little bit surprised when that comes, and I just want to make sure that we're at least, I realize dollar-wise, it doesn't make a lot of, but I think to some individuals who've been here a long time, it does, makes a big deal to them.
Well, and is it possible they've got water shares they don't actually need?
Well, I'm sure there's that going on as well, but
There's quite a few people that have shares. that don't-
those will be happy to just get a little discount off of it, I think. Well, I don't want to speak for them, but I suspect that's it.
We'll wait till we finish here and then have it come up.
The largest shareholder by far is the city, about 44 of the 184
So
shares.
isn't a share about an hour, is that right?
It depends on the ditch.
Really?
Yeah.
Every ditch is different.
It's,
And one of the issues is over the years, the shares have been broken down so many times. Somebody had a full share and had an acre piece of ground, and then they sold them off, or they sent off shares. That's why you see all these top numbers. If you go into the actual book, and it's 1/11 of a share.
Yeah.
And
1/5 of a share. It's just really odd how over the years, all those shares got broken down.
it only makes sense if you're a farmer.
What?
I have a quarter of a share. I believe mine's a quarter. It's an hour.
Mike, I'm assuming you looked at, when you were looking at sources on all this, I know at one time, maybe a few councils ago, where there was some discussion of over on the Coral Canyon side of the ridge, a storage area over there and some possibilities with that. I'm assuming
Yeah, and we looked at that right down there at the old sand pit. It's just getting the pipe out of there, coming down to the
Cost of
wash and getting them across the river.
sending it down.
It was just too costly to pipe that. That one road. Now, Coral Canyon, we could possibly use as a reservoir.
You're talking right by the landfill there?
On top of the hill there.
Yeah, it's, and it would be a lot of work because it's groundwater that's actually coming in and then just the sand. Fill and some sand. They dug a hole with, now it's still with water, so it doesn't need any criteria for a dam.
Exactly.
We'd have to do a lot of work on it.
What about also, I'm assuming you looked, and I don't know what the feasibilities would have been with those detention basins that we were maintaining with the Flood Control Authority and some of those things being utilized as becoming the reservoir, the holding reservoir into those, and I don't know, maybe liabilities or
Yeah,
to the point where we don't want to touch those things, I don't
Yeah,
know.
they're not designed for holding water, and it would reduce our capacity from what they were designed for, would have to increase. And actually change the design of them.
Probably would stay away from that.
We did have this gentleman had a question.
Question
Or a
kind of-
comment.
and a comment. So, Michael Kate Hoff, I live on 91 East, 400 South. 400 North. So,
We know where you live.
we know where I live. So 2 comments. So I do have shares. And so I think 2 of the things we need to kind of take into consideration is one, there is a connection cost. And I can kind of see that offsetting a little bit, but there's a reduced cost for those that have those shares. As she was mentioning a little bit earlier, you know, she's only paying $30 a year for that entire amount. So if you go to a, you know, $30, $40 a month charge, that's going to be something that's a little bit harder to bear for people that are used to receiving free water or whatever you want to call it with that. So if there's any way that you can consider a compensation for, you know, like an unmetered, if it's a metered option or something along those lines, that they get some sort of unmetered access or something along those
We're really
lines.
talking about some degree of grandfathering.
Yeah, grandfathering somebody in that had that water previously so that they're made whole, if you will. I think it's going to be a lot more acceptable to those. And then the second point with that would be, you've got the list of people that are affected. I think it'd be really nice to reach out to them, have a meeting, get their feedback, their input, see how much they're using it. I know we're still kind of in the planning stages, but communication is going to go a long ways to making it acceptable.
Yeah, I think that,
To
I think
people.
where we're at right now is that it may never even go off this square.
Understood.
And so what we don't want to do is just, we want
Get
to make
people
sure we have the
worried.
right information
Right.
to give to them to have the discussion.
But it does seem like we're getting closer and closer. So the sooner that you can get that feedback and maybe stage it that way, say, hey, this may never happen, but if it did happen, how would it be acceptable to you or make it acceptable to you would probably go a long ways for
I'm
people.
not sure we're quite there yet because the council is going to have to give us some continued guidance. One thing I will point out to this point, this is one of those things that no good deed goes unrewarded as well, is that, yeah, that's a challenge. And you realize that we get an extra lump if we're trying to recognize the value that they've paid up to this point with the understanding that we've been subsidizing those shares for years and years and years.
For
The
real.
city now has to take an extra lump on that. So by allowing those subsidies to occur, that just has compounded our problem on the city side a little bit
I
with the value
agree.
that they understand it to be.
And then the last comment too, just to kind of, I like the fact that you're addressing, you know, reduced demand is going to reduce income on the culinary side. I think that's something very important to consider. But also after the 20 years, I think you're going to have to start looking at increased maintenance costs as well on both sides as well. So I think it's going to be really hard once you get those fees increased. Most people are going to say the city council is never going to reduce them.
I had the same thought. I thought,
It's going to be tough to get that.
we'd be the one government entity that was able to roll it back.
So anyway, appreciate your time.
No, thank
Yeah,
you.
I think to that point too, again, I appreciate the straight math, and that's what you've done here. You've just done the straight math, and that gives perspective, and I think that kind of frames the discussion. But I do think all those are absolutely correct points, and I think if history has taught us, at least in a lot of other communities, that is probably an accurate statement. We probably would not see, at least at best, not see a reduction, just because of, I mean, it'd be great to think so, but I think we'd be safest to just already say that that's probably not going to
One other point I wanted to bring up, we didn't reflect that here, but if you're to move forward with implementing an irrigation system like this, everybody within that area you'd have to have everybody tie on. Everybody'd have to
Right.
participate. It wouldn't be like an optional, if you want to use secondary water, tie on. If not, just continue. To financially get through it, everybody would have to go.
Mandated.
Gee, we
So
know
that's-
how that worked with Blue Can, didn't we, don't we?
So can I
that
ask
is
this?
interesting. We talked about that before. So that is something we probably ought to think through a little bit. I mean, there are individuals in certain portions of the city who are going to say, well, I don't use my water, and your code compliance officials are going to say, well, it's true. You don't use your water. Your yard is.
So we had a
totally
similar
usable."
situation out in the fields when we put in sewer. We simply had to say it's a requirement on sewer.
Yeah.
And that, again, had individuals that didn't care for that decision, but it was a decision that had to be made in order to make it work.
Their
Do we-
septic work fine.
Do we know on this one, have you incorporated, because I think the state is leaning this way, have we incorporated metering?
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the
that's
state's almost
included in the
requiring
cost,
that now. Is
in
that
the
now
cost
been-
estimates, it's the metering.
And how do we feel about that metering process? I know that that's, in years past, there's been some concern about the technology associated with the metering, especially if it's gridded and those type of things. How's that looking? Because again,
Those have come
depending on what you
along.
get, the
Yeah.
maintenance cost could be a real substantial
Yeah.
problem with the metering.
Yeah, those meters have come a long ways for secondary water for irrigation. Yeah. Any other
Justin, thank
questions?
you. Very informative.
They measure by the particulates that pass through about the water. The snails that come through.
Uh,
Salt.
Yeah. I need that back.
For a fee, you can have it back, Justin.
So correct me, when does this come before us? This isn't, we're not voting on this tomorrow or anything. We're gonna,
No,
we're,
We're probably still 2 to 3 months,
to finish up and then you're gonna hit us.
and then we should be a lot, right?
Right. And then we
We'll have the numbers back available, like this stuff.
get a full
Would we
draft
be at that
report in
point
your
ready
hands.
then for our public to engage with that portion of it?
Well,
Yeah.
I think so. So one of the thoughts I had is really, once you get this dialed down, I mean, it's a stop, wait, or go. Because if the council looks at this and says, we as the representatives don't think this makes reasonable sense, you can stop right then. Or you can say, well, we're not quite sure how that is. Let's move to the public input, see how they feel, because it is going to be an impact upon them. They do have all these questions. Or you can be just really bold and make that decision. But I think the reason that I made the comment with regards to the public to this point is, until we fine tune these numbers, I mean, it may be so obvious the answer that the council can make that decision without having to take that.
Well, and you present it to us like phase 1, phase 2, we can do that. We don't have to do the whole city all at once.
Right.
And so being selective about where that occurs, which is more likely with existing irrigation water or new construction, whatever makes the most sense to us, because those, that changes everybody voting on impact fees to us. It's
Yeah.
sectional. It's sectional. And what does that mean for us as a city if we do it by sections?
So then you have phase 1, phase 2. Coral Canyon is not included in that at all.
Right.
Looking at those maps, what else is not included?
The fields, parts of the fields, the green space area, those would be coming in phases.
Mhm.
But the rest of the city, other than Coral Canyon,
So right now, we don't anticipate Coral Canyon going
well,
No,
pressurized.
that's
the issue
everything.
with Coral Canyon is that Coral Canyon actually has their landscape standards, and they're almost 50% less than what we're, a normal residence would see. So, I mean, it's something we can do with Coral Canyon, but there's no.
The
right-
necessity's not as great.
Yes,
Well, geographically, they don't work in as well.
right. It'd be a whole and separate, bringing it up and flow.
But virtually every other location is either in what you've shown here, phase 1 or 2. I mean, I just want to make sure I'm not missing something, some of the portions.
Well,
We just showed phase 1 and 1A and 1B, but the other phase, like two would be up at the top of Green Springs, and you connect to Pineview Estates, and some of these others would be your phases 2, 3, 4. As far as the timing on those, I think it would just be as the appetite and the connections there. Well, I mean, once you get these two initial 1A and 1B in place, those others are just periphery that could tie in, and you'd have the storage primarily there. You'd have the transmission lines. It'd mainly be adding the network and the meters and whatnot to tie them into the system.
Well, and what we haven't talked about, and really hasn't been on our list of discussions, is standards for the usage of water. You know, like my HOA requires a third of the front yard to be in grass. Okay, I really, that somewhere needs to be part of the discussion. You know, what are we willing to use water for in a desert, in a declining resource, when we need to be more conservative, maybe. Okay.
Mayor, can I jump in here real quick?
Go ahead.
Just add a quick question. I'm not really catching a whole lot of the conversation. It's a little spotty, but last I recall, the state was moving towards either allocating funds towards secondary water systems or requiring some sort of secondary water system. Do we know where the state's at with that?
So what I remember is that the last state had done, or was considering, I shouldn't say done, and I'm not sure that this has changed, but I believe when it was looking at a requirement with respect to metering, it was going to provide some funding for these communities to do the conversion to metering. Is that correct? So I think it was kind of narrowly defined to the metering, and particularly because they were going to require retrofitting on metering as well. And so they were trying to figure out how to make this workable for small communities.
So it's just that one small portion of the system, not any trunk lines.
Yeah, that's how I remember it. I don't think that they've carved out anything larger than that at the moment.
I'd just be curious to see what they come up with. Thanks.
Thank you.
One other question, Dustin. Is the storage facility, this north of the town one, I know that we talked about being sufficient for our proposed 1A.
Mhm.
Will it also handle the expansion of all of Green Springs and that, or do we need to look at another source to
It'll
feed
handle,
everything else over there?
it would depend on how big you built that one. You could either build that one larger or have maybe two locations. There's some options there to do it.
I guess with the other location, what would our resource be?
Well, it'd be the same resource. It'd just be you'd have that part of the network and
So
get pipe water to
you'd
it.
have enough storage, so the resource is there,
Yeah.
we just have to build storage to handle it.
So to get from, so that elevation will only pressurize up to a certain point of Green Springs. Above that elevation, you're going to either have to pump it or put a second reservoir higher. So that would
So
be
how
the
do we get
option.
higher than that if we've got Green Springs built up to the Tortoise Preserve?
That's the question.
Yeah.
So our highest culinary restaurant, we have those who have that.
Yeah.
Not quite, because we don't have to keep the same pressure.
That's exactly what we were thinking. Probably the best scenario is probably to pump that, to pressurize it. On your culinary system pumping, it's a problematic because you have to have backup emergency power. You have to pump
Right.
fire flows and everything, but for an irrigation system pumping, that's
Yeah,
not a,
reduce it.
yeah, exactly.
All right.
I think one more question.
So how would you phase in the impact for the connection fees or whatnot? If you're doing phases, obviously, you know, phase one, you're only gonna be able to charge connection fees for phase one of that footprint, right? So
Right.
the capacity within the billing and all that kind of stuff to be able to mandate it for a small section. Or, 'cause you're not
So
gonna mandate
within
it
the
for
billing?
entire city.
You're asking if you can send a bill to just that area.
Well, yeah. How do you-
It essentially, yeah, you would have to do, and the connection fee and the monthly rate
Right.
would just be to those that have access to it.
Just-
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume next time we'll be having our draft report that would probably be in your hands, so you can kind of go through more of the details and whatnot before we do a presentation.
All right. Thank you, Dustin, very much. Thanks for your input out there. We do appreciate it.
Tara's connection keeps sabotaging my computer. I'm going to leave that up because Rick's going to use it here in just a second.
Move on to item 4, update review of the Main Street project.
Unless you want to turn back to Penny. Is Penny
Is
here?
Penny here? Okay, we'll go back to item 2, discussion of current, sorry about that. Proposed traffic on Bullock Street and possible mitigation.
Sorry, Penny Beckstrand. Sorry, I'm late. It's parent night at the school.
It's all right. That's where you should be.
Yeah, well. All right, so we, first and foremost, would like to have a 4-way stop on Bullock and Community Center Drive. We know that the community on 200 South and 200 West put together a petition, and because they were afraid of that intersection, and that was granted. We also feel that intersection on Bullock Street and Washington Community Center Drive is very unsafe. Put a petition together, everybody in the neighborhood signed it, turned that in. And if you look, I'm sure I asked them to hand out papers. I don't know if you all got them. The aerial view of that intersection, if you look at it just normal, it lines up. If you look at it satellite view, does not line up at all. So none of those, well, we all know that road was originally not meant to go through at all on Uri Circle. That road was meant to be a circle and a circle only. It wasn't meant to ever go through. So now that it goes through, it's all sorts of weird. So we would like to get a 4-way stop there. And we don't know why that wouldn't be granted when 200 and 200 lines up perfectly. So that would be our first thing that we would like to do. And then the second goal for us would be the residential collector on the master plan to be changed. Instead of going through Bullock to 300 East, to change and go down Community Center Drive, because we do not want our property to be ripped up and taken 6 feet of each side taken off, then another 2 feet for the sidewalk, which would mean everybody's property would be taken out. And if you just change the residential collector on the master plan to go down Community Center Drive, if that needs to be widened, then that's already city land and you can open that up and then you wouldn't have any problems with all the residents that own that land. So that's what we would like. And then if that doesn't happen, then we'd like Bullock Street to be made into a 1-way street so that we all then don't have to dig up our roads on that street as well, because of all of the kids that go to and from the school there and the library and the rec center and the ball fields. It would just be safer all around than to make that an extremely busy street. So you should have a list of all the names. There was one house that did not sign because the people that live there are renters and they did not feel that it was their right to sign for the people who own the house.
Futuristically, one thing that would help me with petitions is to say what the petition is other than just names. Because I don't know what was presented to people that say, what are you signing for?
Should have been stapled to it.
Yeah,
I
didn't
turned it
see
in.
that. And maybe I just didn't see that portion. All I seen was names and address. It's like, okay, what were we signing here? Say, not that I disagree with what you presented. Just a point of clarification. So you're wanting Bullock to stay a major collector until it hits Community Center Drive. And at that point, then to narrow down, Community Center Drive becomes the major collector on to 300, and Bullock then maintains what it is today.
No, we wanted to turn and go down Community Center Drive, which is already wider than Bullock
That's what I'm
Street
saying,
to there.
the collector portion of it.
Right.
And so Bullock from 300 to Community Center Drive would maintain today's widths, today's traffic, per se. Correct?
Yes.
Both sides of Bullock.
Yes. I can give you the actual footage of that.
I was just looking at this, so I was just wondering.
Can we get a topo up so we can see that?
You should have these papers. I asked her to give them to you all, but
That's in your packet too.
Mike, we don't have any other right of way up there, do we? Aren't we built out to right of way at this point? Yeah, so that's really,
the road on that street is 30 feet on both sides. The sidewalks are 6 feet for a total of 32 feet. But then on the other side of Bullock Street, it is 38 feet with 7-foot sidewalks, making it 52 feet. So it's 10 feet wider on that side of Bullock than it is ours.
Do we have a traffic count up there? Because I drove up there Monday morning about 11 o'clock and I saw one other car.
Yeah, so the four-way stop from staff's point does not meet warrants. Now, when it doesn't meet warrants from staff standpoint, then what is procedure is exactly what's being presented here. It comes to council because only council can choose to, which was the same situation with the example that was given, is the council would grant that because staff can't because it doesn't meet warrants.
Right, there you go. And it already has sidewalks or crosswalks.
Yeah, the question on the sidewalk is the safety issue problematic because all the cars are parking on the sidewalk, or at least a good portion?
But car parking is a big deal when it's there.
Because parking is a problem.
Well, if you're going north or south on Community Center Drive, so you're looking kind of north there. Once you're stopped at that stoplight, which would be there at the bottom of the screen, you can't see left very well at all. If there's a vehicle parked in that road, you can't see oncoming traffic. Now you have the opposite problem if you're going south there to see what's kind of coming around the corner because of the alignment of those streets. And it is a little bit problematic.
So the question I have, does it help on safety issues if we enforce the parking on the sidewalks? Because that is a problem and that is pushing kids into the street because we have vehicles parking on the sidewalks and we've not really been heavily handed in enforcing the parking on the sidewalk. But certainly,
Well,
if you've got
I don't know
sidewalks
that parking on the sidewalk in that area is so much of a problem. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there were no parking on the streets, that would significantly change in that.
So I'm looking
in that-
actually
just
yeah.
an area there. That is
Well-
one thing that would have a significant
No,
mitigation.
you're correct. The street is narrow, so parking on the street. I was just looking at this aerial that was provided, and it looks like the one car is actually on the sidewalk as we speak. But you're right. That's why I asked the question: is parking on the sidewalk part of the problem?
You're saying parking on the sidewalk so that the pedestrians are forced into the street to go around the cars.
Because it is narrow enough. It is narrow enough that those that are parking are trying to cinch as tight as they can to the edge of the road, and in some cases that has been. So I was just wondering if that helps the safety issue for us to enforce at least a parking issue.
The thing that we see is the people that have a problem with the cars on that street are the people that do not live on that street.
Well, so an enforcement
So-
might be helpful.
Well, a four-way stop there, people would probably go down that street instead of driving through our neighborhood.
Well, but if they're
But
parking
finish-
there, they're
but finish what
reparking
you're
there for a
saying, though.
reason, so they're still gonna wanna park in that area. So if that's the case, and I'm actually happy to hear that it's probably not the residents, because I
It's
think, well, then I think
not the
what we
residents.
ought to do to try to at least help, not solve the problem, but at least help is we could start to enforce the parking issue on that street.
Is
Especially
that
on
what
the
you're saying,
sidewalk.
Penny? You're saying
No,
people,
The parking
You're
on
saying
that
just
street
the
is not a
opposite.
problem. The parking on the problem is people rushing through that intersection through our neighborhood and not stopping at that intersection. If they stopped at that intersection and took their time and drove safely, if people are walking on that sidewalk, there's not a problem. There's always,
so
they
your
do
biggest
park on the
concern
curb.
is the intersection per se.
Yes.
That's your concern, is the intersection, not the street itself, it's the intersection.
It's the intersection, first and foremost.
well, and then the secondary issue is taking away land from the people who are on
Well, and
that
that's,
section of Bullock.
yeah,
It's gonna be
and
wide.
I could agree. I mean, we certainly have it master planned as that way, and
Right.
I would like to think that we certainly can change that, because number one, I don't think that road's ever gonna accommodate the master planning of a collector clear through that,
Right.
just for the nature of what's there. Number one, we'd have to buy the right of way, number one, those homes are too close.
Well,
So
and when
what
you
do we
come
do
out,
to that? So I can agree with your proposal. I would tell you, at least from my point of view at this point, to leave Bullock a major collector to Community Center Drive. Community Center Drive then carries that traffic onto
Right.
300. So we have this 2 blocks, basically 2.5 blocks, 3 blocks, that we narrow back down, we calm traffic back into that, and it's mainly people who live there that are coming in.
Right.
for the most part.
It also helps with when you go down Community Center Drive, the road stops and then it continues through to the next street. If you go down Bullock to 300, it stops. There's a house that next road does not go through,
Yeah, 300, yeah, it doesn't
Right.
line up with it. Bullock doesn't line up with anything.
Right.
Other than 300.
which,
It stays what it is today.
Yeah, it
stays
just
what
stays.
Today.
that's what we want. We want that part of the road to
Yeah, I
stay
think
how
the
it
biggest
is.
fear is because we master plan major collector all the way to 300, but they're saying we're gonna come back to the middle of the subdivision and widen that road out, and they're not wanting that. And I can
That's
agree with that.
correct.
Well, that's, and I will tell you, we've had several, I shouldn't say several, a few people have talked to us about this four-way intersection. I know the last time was about 3 years ago. We said, if you can bring us people that are willing to have it, we'll put it in for you. This is the first time I've seen something finally come back.
Right.
So I guess with what has been proposed here, I have no problem with your proposals.
So Mike, talk to me about any concerns that you might have.
So four-way stops.
And I think Troy wants you to speak into the microphone.
Four-way stops, it's very clear in the law that you don't use them to control speeds. So, you know, we're very good at that. We don't put them in to try to slow speeds down. There's been many requests over, you know, the time I've been with Washington City for this to be a four-way stop. It doesn't meet any of the warrants. We still have warrants like we do a signal for four-way stops. It doesn't meet the warrants for the four-way stop on it. The down on 200 where we put that in, that actually didn't meet warrants as well, but that was a council decision to put it in. Other than down there, they had had 2 serious accidents. I pulled the accident data up for this. The only one I could find was in 2015. There was the way I read it, somebody was out in the intersection and backed up into the car that was behind it. That's the last recorded.
Well, I know that when I first moved into this neighborhood, I was surprised that was not a four-way stop. Well, it almost got me in trouble because I pulled up to that intersection, kind of assuming that other car, obviously this has to be, should be a four-way stop. That other car is going to stop, and I had to realize
I would
he
agree.
has
It's
the
kind
right
of an awkward intersection.
It
because
is.
It does kind of.
traffic
Yeah,
patterns
yeah,
don't
you-
do it, and slowing the traffic down probably isn't the right way to do it, but creating some safety because of the odd angles and the difficulty of the sight line, that might be.
That's the thing I look at there is most of that is all going to be local traffic that's using that. And oftentimes the reason we don't do things until warrants produce them is because we create liabilities intentionally there. I just don't see us really doing that with this particular one. For the mere fact it's all localized.
Right. We
Traffic.
never count up in that area because it's such low volumes that there's no real need for us
And
to
that's what I
count.
look and say, hey, if these people don't mind stopping here, put a stop sign in.
Well, so just from a traffic standpoint, not just putting in a stop sign, but I guess what my concern is that now people are actually used to this not being a four-way stop and that being a through street. Do we need to do something above and beyond to go ahead and put a stop sign in there rather than just a stop sign? Because people are used to just running through there and not having
Well,
to stop.
Usually whenever you do that, you put a sign up and say,
Well, that's what I mean.
you know,
Do you
stop
have to?
sign, you do that for a couple of weeks just to notify.
Is that all you
people
do?
there's a
You just
change.
put up a flashing light for a little while to make sure people recognize that the signage changed? And
We've never,
I
I mean,
I know
it's-
down in the fields when they
it-
threw the new signal in for the first 2 or 3 days, they just threw a sign up that said, beware of stoplight.
I would,
And
yeah.
it's just a
well, we're
notice that it's
changing
now
it.
turned on and functioning.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, you
stoplights.
expect to see changes, like, personally, I expect to see changes on roads that are new and different. But when I'm on a road that I've driven many times before and all of a sudden something changes like a stop sign, it throws me. I'd like to see.
No,
some-
and that's why I think you would want to notify somehow.
I do
Yeah.
too.
To me, that's why, a flashing sign down,
I think that would be
you got those little
sufficient.
portable signs that you throw up and.
we do stop ahead signs.
Yeah.
They transitioned to the one over by Wendy's in St. George and Sandstone Elementary, coming out from Limeview High School. They transitioned to a four-way that, they did that flashing for a while because people were just so used to blasting through, especially the high school
Well,
I agree.
yeah, it's not a huge neighborhood too, even some
The issue with
distribution of information to the homes might.
Yeah,
get
the
that
issue with
across.
flashing is getting power to make, so we could have flashing units up there.
Any other
I heard they started
concerns that
making
you
those
have?
battery things now. I don't know. Solar.
Okay, when you say it doesn't meet the warrants, what are the warrants?
Well, there's, I think on the four-way stop, I think there's, I don't know. You can go there. Rick? How many warrants do you think on the stop? It's not like a signal, but
No.
yeah, I'm not.
Off, left-hand turn
What's that?
motions.
Left-hand
Accidents.
turning accidents, pedestrians.
Yeah, there's-
Is there a volume limit? Because the accident history seems like a terrible way that you have to wait for people to get hit and hurt before you move forward.
Well, there's other parts to it, like I say, left-hand turning movements.
Yeah, one of the big ones here would be the pedestrians. This is heavily pedestrianized through here, especially through school, community center, ballparks. I mean,
Yep.
that's those
As
areas.
far as warrants on this, it doesn't concern me a whole lot because it is a very low usage road. And then I'll just hit real quickly on changing the classification. I have no problem changing it to community center drive. This has been in our master plan since 1998. So it's
That
just
road was
carried
built-
through,
Yeah, that road was built
year
prior
after
to
year.
that, so.
in the modeling, now we got some really good models of our traffic model of the city. This road really is not going to see much use at all, even if we left it designated the way it is. But on out, it's carrying over to get over to 1100 East. It's that Cotton Mill area subdivision. Those are the people that are going to be using it, that we're going to be heading over towards the exit 13.
Well, what you're gonna have is these people getting to that, hopefully that becomes one of our main commercial areas. So it's these folks trying to get to that commercial area. So you're carrying traffic out of the neighborhood more than traffic into the neighborhood.
Right, the model doesn't show a lot of inflow onto Bullock Street from 300 East. But again, I don't think it's a big issue. We're going to be redoing our transportation master plan this year. If council wants that, I don't see any problem with us changing that to community center drive.
Yeah, it is a good way to get people lost, to send them up through Bullock Street there. Out of those roads.
Any other questions for Penny? Thank you. It sounds like it. Council's agreeable.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll move on to our update on the Main Street project. Sunrise Engineering.
That's something we need to vote on? Well, I know, but I'm wondering, so as far as the next step, we'd have to put that on
Put it on the agenda.
council and-
Separates itself from what our normal standard is, that would probably be the best situation, so we'll just get that on the next agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Do the overall.
Did you already call this on the agenda?
I did.
Okay. So just a quick update on our Main Street project. I'll turn time over to Rick Snyder from Sunrise Engineering, the consultant on the project. Give you a quick update.
Thank you.
So I'll answer the question. Yes, I am the best looking sunrise engineer tonight, so.
Rick, they've got one with a full beard, one with glasses, and one with no hair. And one young kid, and another with no hair and glasses. Yeah, we do. That's awesome. Thank you.
I'm just trying to get it to cast over to that screen here. might be as good as it's gonna get here. Okay. But we'll run with this for the sake of time. I apologize that it's not working very well. Just wanted to give you a quick update. Hopefully this will be the shortest agenda item, unless you have more questions. So just to give you a quick update on what's happened, we're at 60% plans. We're on schedule to have the project advertised first part of November. Since we last came, I think the biggest changes are that you're seeing here is, and let me zoom in so you can see it, is we've made quite a few changes to the landscaping. The last option you saw, there's that almost 3-foot strip behind the sidewalk that we were considering landscaping and having the city maintain it. Since that time, with the direction that we've been given from just about everyone, that's going to go back to what the residents had before and just be tied back in. So then we've refocused the lighting to be just in the shoulder planters that you see here and here, and then also in the center median here. And I've got an exhibit that kind of shows a draft of what we're kind of looking at there. Currently, we're working with the Parks Department to find just the right kind of trees that aren't going to encroach in the roadway, yet still look really good and be hardy, and then the right kind of plants. Another thing that we've added is we've been working with the power department on the new street lights. I notice Rick Hansen's here. He could probably speak to it better than I can, but we do have the new layout for the street lights going. They're going to be similar in style to what you see on Telegraph, with the ones on the sides being overhung, and then the one in the middle just being the single pole.
So you decided not to go with the disco ball style?
I didn't even know that was an
Until we hit
option.
200
What?
north, and the 200 north is the disco.
And then I think the other major change, and I can't remember if this was on the last one, is
What's the best view that you have for seeing what those lights look like, your proposed light?
Do you want to talk about that, Rick?
Is it basically just what's on Telegraph? Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're shooting for. The fixtures on Telegraph are very pricey, so we're hoping to find something that looks very similar but more cost effective. And I'm hoping to get information on those tomorrow. I got an email just a little before meeting started. So that's our goal, is to get the same look, but more cost effective. Anything else on that?
And the last thing that I'm showing here, and this doesn't look like much of a change from the last time, but we're still working on the engineering behind transitioning from the water coming under the freeway, and how do we get that to the new section. So this is a little different from last time, not much, but just give you an idea of kind of the work going on behind the scenes to try to get it to not only look good, but function to handle the drainage. So I think there is one other change for safety, site distance, and maintenance. We're not planning to landscape these side streets. Instead, we're going to be looking at some kind of stamped or stained concrete to fill that in, just to keep the visibility open there. So. Any questions?
back to the top of Main Street. Mike, just a question with that. We know that UDOT's gonna be widening the freeway sometime. Is this gonna hinder, if we've already built this infrastructure into tapering there? I know that they've talked about the need for those existing freeway over ramps to be revamped with that. I'm assuming that that's not going to affect us, that they only put back what we've got, that they would
No.
state that they would widen those out and do what we need to do to widen that road.
Right.
Going underneath there. Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that they don't come back and say, well, here, your infrastructure tapers to this, so this is what you get back.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, coming in with the width that we've come up all the way up to 400 north. We've got the infrastructure there. We had to neck it down to go under there. So,
Yeah. I
you know,
just wanna
they
make
would
sure when
obviously,
widen that, we could get our bike lanes under, and those things are that carry the full road clear through.
and I actually had conversations with that. And when they do, they're going to add a lane onto the interstate. And this structure won't handle an additional lane.
Correct.
They would have to completely
demolish
demolish the structure and bring it up to UDOT standards, which is also raise
Taller, correct.
it taller because we've had a lot of
I just-
equipment
I
hit
just,
that.
yeah, I knew that they'd have to raise it up. I just didn't want them to, I want them to
They would
say, hey,
also
your
go,
Main Street needs to widen out coming under here too, because then we can carry our bike lanes through.
Right.
And the
Well,
safety,
and-
because right now we have a huge safety problem waiting right there.
correct.
No matter what happens with some future exit, okay? Are we on the list of UDOT to get that structure fixed and widened?
Yes.
Okay,
With the,
Where-
with the widening of I-15, they have to do that structure.
so we're in timeframes, or are we on a list somewhere that that's gonna
Not
happen?
yet. I've heard rumor that they're looking at widening around 2023. But
So
it'll
funding,
come,
Yeah, it's a funding.
yeah, it'll come out on their funding list when they actually allocate funding for that project.
So would it be useful for us to have our legislators working on funding for that?
Not necessarily. It's going to be part of their project. It's something they have to do. They've scheduled the widening of all these sections up I-15, and this is just one of those that they're scheduling in. So UDOT's well aware of what we're doing here. They're well aware that that structure would have to be replaced to take in account the additional width of what we have.
So I'm assuming in the engineering of this and whatnot, we're taking that into account, that eventually someday it's gonna widen out.
Correct.
When we're done, hold on.
Any
Are we
other
done?
questions?
Right,
Clarification question, Wallace Jones. So is that planter median, is it coming all the way from 400 down to Telegraph, or are select blocks on Main Street gonna have?
Every block,
Okay, so it'll come the whole 400,
yes.
okay.
So you can see.
So this is actually on the city's website. From their front page, you go down to the projects, and then Main Street, and you can see it's not as updated as this one is, because he's changed, like he said, the planters is on the side streets are just about the only change that's,
And we will
Yeah, there's not.
update it. You know, we want council to see before we change our webpage.
Okay.
The
Just
the
one-
irrigation study is on that. Any project the city has that we're currently working on, and we're trying to get it updated. So we ultimately want to get a 10-year plan to where you can go right on the front page, click on it, and find out what the city's doing for the city.
It just looked like in one of the slides that it was like Main Street and not this one, and then the next one, and so that's why I was confused.
Thanks, Lois.
yeah.
Any other questions for Rick or
I just
Mike?
wonder if it'd be worthwhile to mention what we're doing for this year as far as flood mitigation, if there happens to be a problem with what you've got at the top of Main Street.
Well, we've actually set Jersey barriers up across the property there to where we can hurry in and set and close the road completely off, direct the water down. We've cut a ditch carrying it around the boilers puts it into Mill Creek. There's a lot of area that will inundate of that property up there, which slows down the water, stores water for us to get rid of it. But our basins up there, that's kind of our ace in the hole. Those basins will hold a lot of water, so.
Well, I appreciate that.
And we're coming out of our monsoon season, so
Yeah.
we
We're
kind of,
getting pretty close.
Actually gotten into it, have we?
well, we didn't get a monsoon this year, but that's not out of the norm.
Knock on wood, I can't believe you said that.
Yeah.
There's been many years we have not had monsoon rains.
A lot of folks there had a lot of trouble. I appreciate the effort to work out a way to get those barriers in there and have some extra degree of protection until this can get in
Yeah,
place.
we've got a plan. We've got people that are on call that will come out and we have the loader that's stationed up there. It's, whenever we know that we possibly could get some rain, we want to make sure the loader's there that we can move those barriers in place very quickly.
You're kind of just basing that off of the national weather forecast and a few other indicators.
Right,
that
exactly.
would cause that to trigger.
You know,
You've actually put those barriers up high enough that in the hours before a storm hit, that emergency vehicles could come a long way around those barriers on the side
Right.
and actually access Main Street if the water wasn't flowing.
And we have quite a bit of time to get in there with those basins up there too. That's bought us a lot of extra time.
Good? All right, thanks, Rick. Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Dustin. Item 5, discussion and review of the proposed analysis / facility plan for Washington City Parks and Recreation. I'll turn that to, come on up.
Mayor and council members, we appreciate, again, another okay. We appreciate it. We're following up again on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update we've been working on with Barry. I think we've been before the council a couple of times already to discuss the parameters and the ins and outs of the plan and the assumptions that all went into it and the improvements that we're recommending. Our purpose here tonight is to review some of the things that you'll be considering relative to the impact fee and where to set that. When we left the council at our last meeting, maybe I'll just, no, you're all right, Councilman. Okay. If everybody okay? We don't want to talk over you, I apologize.
Some of
But
us are paying attention.
okay, Colene's ready. Anyway, when we left the last council meeting, we had left with the tasks of coming back with a review of what impact fees other communities local to Washington County and then also in Utah are seeing for impact fees in general and Parks and Recreation impact fees specifically. That document that we handed out to you there has those. In the bottom chart, you'll see that Washington City is somewhere in the about 2/3 of the way up the scale of proposed impact fees, or excuse me, existing impact fees. You'll remember that the current impact fee is set at $3,700. That was the result of the last master planning process that the city took upon themselves
When was that?
5 or 6 years ago. It's been quite a little while yet.
And what was the impact fee before that?
Well, can I clarify one thing? It was the adopted fee from the last capital. It wasn't the maximum allowable fee. I just want to
Correct.
make sure that was.
Yeah.
What was the fee before that fee was adopted?
I don't know if I recall, Roger, do you?
No,
What it
we
is.
probably look it up, previous capital facilities plans, but not off the top of my head.
It was somewhere in that neighborhood, if I remember correctly. And
I
if
actually think it was a little higher, if I recall, because I think that council actually reduced it a little bit.
Yeah, so the last one I know for a fact was reduced this equivalent amount of what the public safety impact fee came in.
was it $500 or $600 difference or more than that?
No, it was just, I think, about that.
Yeah, it's kind of the order of magnitude I remember. But anyway, the other thing that we're presenting to you is on the top portion of that sheet that we handed out is that impact fee if-then table. You'll recall that the master plan that we've just completed recommended a maximum impact fee or calculated a maximum allowable impact fee of $6,295. And we recommended that fee level to you as the one that would retain the existing level of service for your parks, which is 3.69 acres per 1,000 people, and your existing level of service for your trails, which is 0.7 miles per 1,000 people. And then it presents if the council were to adopt an impact fee at a lower level than the $6,295, what would that do over time to your levels of service for both parks and trails? And so the range there goes from the maximum of 6,295 down to 3,700, which is the level of the existing impact fee, and suggests that in a matter of about 10 years, if you were to go with the lower or retain the existing level, that your level of service would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.25 acres per 1,000 people, and your level of service on the trails would have diminished from 0.7 to 0.59 per 1,000 people on that number. Some considerations as for when the council is again preparing to adopt a new impact fee based on the results of the master plan. The one thing that's particular to Washington City is that it relies heavily on those impact fees to bring in new parks to the city. And there's not a lot of other revenue stream available to do that.
Are we using the impact fee then to pay off that existing debt?
Yes.
Correct, yes, for eligible projects.
Is that the community center?
That's one of them,
It's
yeah.
one of them, Sullivan.
Sullivan?
There is we feel, and I think the city feels, that there's a tremendous draw to the city by Parks and Recreation and the offerings that it presents to it, both its existing residents and future residents, those that are considering purchasing or building a home here in the city. So that's an important element. One other consideration too is that the city's the existing population through the expenditure of impact fees has put a lot of investment into Parks and Recreation, and through that process of time has established a level of service that currently exists here. So you
I'll
can
I'll
go ahead,
just
Roger.
add, we don't, from staff standpoint necessarily, we're not coming with a recommendation, but what we wanted to be clear on is these numbers don't exist in a vacuum, which means that if the 6295 is what was it? Yeah, 6295 is recommended and the council chooses something separate, which they always have, that has an impact on what we can do. And so sometimes those don't get connected properly. So all we ask Sunrise to do is give us kind of a sensitivity analysis, if you will, that depending on where you place that, this is the outcome. So you don't want either the public or the council confused that we've reduced it, we still expect this outcome with the capital facilities plan. That's the only reason.
Would there be consideration by staff that, and council, if we increase it for parks, that we reduce it somewhere else, so our overall impact fee, which is high, doesn't increase even more?
Well, the problem again is the impact fees. The argument is never on the impact fee. The argument is on the capital facilities. Impact fee is just the map that comes out of the capital facilities
I understand
plan.
that.
So what has to happen is, again, we would have to go back to those capital facilities plan and say, recognize that these capital, and in many cases, by the way, many of those capital facility plans were not adopted at their requested amount as well. This will be a pattern we'll use in all of our capital facilities plan, is create a sensitivity analysis so the council can get like a menu of what does this decision mean versus another. But if we were to do that, the answer is yes, we could do that. The council has always the authority to do that
what we'd have to do is revisit those capital facilities plan and say, at what expense in this capital facility?
Yeah, there's really not a lot of wiggle room for us. The Utah Administrative Code sets forth the parameters by which we calculate an impact fee. And so we try in every case, anytime we do an impact fee analysis, an impact fee facilities plan, we follow the requirements of the code and then deliver to you what your number is that shakes out of that planning process. And then ultimately we try to give you the best information, as Roger referred to, that you can make a decision on the effect of what you adopt on the community down the road. That's what we try to do.
If we increased it, could we allocate that for the next 4 years? That increase would go to pay off that debt sooner?
I think that the council could probably direct it that way for whatever is eligible. Now there, so the Sullivan Park, and I can be corrected, Kimberly, if I need to. The Sullivan Park is 100% impact fee eligible. The community center had a level of service, so if you said, well, we want to move it to the community center, they're not being completely covered their debt service through the impact fee. So even if you were to target that, you'd still have debt left over. I think Sullivan is 100%. It'd probably take us more than a few years, even if we dedicated all of it to do that. You'd have to not do anything else, and it would probably take, I don't know what the math would be. But
Well, you keep doing what you're doing already, but maybe add to what you're doing so we can do it faster.
One
yeah,
consideration.
again, you'll just have to decide where it comes from of the building of existing parks. But yes, you can do that. Yes, you
Just
can.
asking.
Yeah.
What's the, I know you know this right off the top of your head, but the interest rate on the loan that we're dealing with there? Do we get that in before rates or get that adjusted down to some kind of, they're pretty good levels right now?
Yeah, they're usually, so I don't know the answer to the question about what the rate is. Depending on how we structured it, there will be callable time periods in which you can refinance. We usually watch that, so I'm going to suspect that our rate is not, the rate change is not significant enough to justify a refinance. And as you know, we brought those to you when they're triggered, but we'll certainly look at that and see what that is.
Exactly. I remember I was around 3%. It's quite cheap.
So we could basically just keep it at the level of service it is right now and count on Matt Lou to make up the difference with commercial growth in the city. He says he's got it. Got you covered.
As long as you promise to allocate that to parks out of the general fund.
Well, to me, it's a high priority. I would be happy to do something like
That's to
that.
me, the question is, I've kind of mulled over this, is to say, okay, what do you choose to cut out of their proposed developments here if we don't go to that the funding level that's required for that? It's like,
Now,
okay,
wait a
what
minute. Are you doubting Matt? I mean,
No, Matt's on a whole different level. But that's the thing I start looking at and say, okay, I'm willing to forego for a few more years, maybe this park or that park, or because ultimately that's what we do when we start cutting that fund back. We're saying, well, we're prolonging the development of that trail and that park.
well, I say that in a humorous way, but I do think that Washington City is in a unique position currently. I think some of the tables are turning, and I fully expect to see some of the things we're working towards come to fruition. Are you willing to gamble on that and hold things steady to see those come through? Is that unwise of us to wait to that point? That's part of my thinking is.
No, I can appreciate your thinking there, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. The only thing with that line of thinking is those funds compete with every other need through that general fund process. And where this is a committed fund, basically, it becomes dedicated to those specific projects. So you know that those are going to come to fruition, or you anticipate they are because the funds have been allocated there. Where if you're just going to say, hey, my economic growth is going to develop those things, they may or may not.
Well, that's true, and you have, certainly safety issues, police, fire, those things that are going to increase that'll need to be drawing in on some of those funds.
All those become competitive for those same funds.
But I think I think the council is, in years past, has really kind of stayed pretty focused on maintaining and updating and doing our parks.
Right. Yeah, and I can tell you, like I said, the last time actually they decreased this because of an offset. That was exactly what happened. Is we put in place for the public safety impact fee, and that council that time said we don't want our impact fees being higher than they are. So if this one goes up, this one comes down, and that's what they chose to do at that particular time.
What's our annual payment on this out of impact fees?
We can find it.
Do you have a guess?
I have a lot of debt service payments, so we can look it up while we're talking here. The other thing, again, is there's options. I mean, this is not an either or. I mean, the other option you can say is we philosophically are going to change the way we fund parks to not be new structures dependent upon new growth. You can simply say we still want to have certain levels of parks, but we'll only have new growth cover this much, and we'll carry the other one through some form of other revenue increases upon the community. But that's a philosophical kind of discussion that you'll have to shift, because again, these funds go to pay for the new growth parks. Now that's still debt service too that was associated with new growth, but it has always been new growth. But it is not an either or. I mean, you can say we want to maybe increase this amount of revenue off these people, but it's the philosophy of the new parks, new growth versus the other. So.
Well, and some of the thought process too goes back to what Councilman Granger's been working on, and that's some of these trailheads, particularly up into our desert reserve area, to where if we can get a trailhead there, you don't necessarily have to build the trail because it can't. But what it does is gives people those opportunities to go out and experience the trail.
It counts.
Exactly, it counts. That's there.
Counts. It's important access to
So when we
recreation.
start looking at all of our trail improvements that we're talking here, maybe we're offsetting that by where we're putting these
By
trailheads in.
working on these other things, yeah. And it's the same thing with the debt. I know I hammer on debt a lot. But at 2%, well, at 3%, that's, I think it's $210,000 that we could be putting into the budget. But we're not. We're putting it into paying off the debt. But if we didn't have that debt, we'd have that $210,000 to help us with this budget and to increase the available.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that's true. We wouldn't have had a Sullivan Park.
Well, I'll tell you,
because
some
we
of the
wouldn't have been
discussion
able to
that
cash
that council had then was saying, is it going to cost us another $210,000 extra? If we wait 10 years to build it, the cost increase of construction offsets that. So
I know
that was
that's
the
part of the
discussion.
discussion.
Yeah, that was
I know
part of
it
the
is.
discussion.
So one of the other things I want to point out that we did, I can't answer your question. That's what's nice about having someone behind the curtain at the back
Okay,
of the room.
I
It's
get
$1
it.
million a year,
Yeah.
debt service payments
$1 million on this.
on the
Okay.
parks, the impact fee eligible.
Okay, thank you.
And, but one of the things that we've had Sunrise do, which again, I think is worth noting because it's, I think, even more significant than you see in a lot of communities. And that is we've tried to quantify the park feel. So we've said there are private parks. We've said there are even private trails. There's recreational trailheads. And so what we've asked them to do to quantify what that means to us, because again, part of what we try to determine is an appropriate level is the standard. What is the ratio? What should we have per 1,000 population of park? Well, we also know we have private parks, so they should be counted in there because the public doesn't distinguish a lot of times between a private park. Child doesn't know if they're on the swing of a private park versus the swing of a public park. So I only note that because that's been a significant effort on the part of Sunrise. And if you remember the last time we covered that, and I think it has adjusted our ratio. It has adjusted our ratio and said, you know what, maybe our ratio was just a little high because now that we add those other ancillary parks in there, we don't need to build as much. So I think we tried to address an expense side. And again, we're not proposing anything tonight as far as increase. We're just saying, but this is what the capital facilities plan. So whatever you pick here, you get to choose off the menu. You don't choose the whole menu. That's the point.
Well, I think as we talk about these standards, when we talk about maybe the HCAC or other private parks or whatever, we're talking about access. Okay, our standard is what do our patrons have access to? But in the course of access, there's the other issue that I brought up, and we really haven't shown that still, and that's facilities. If on an acre, I can get 3 pickleball courts and a softball court or whatever, you know, those are facilities that I can go there and use. If I've got a 4-acre park and I've only got 2 picnic tables, that's a difference. It's a difference. So if we don't talk about access and we don't talk about facilities, I don't have a very clear picture based on acres of what we really are providing to our citizens.
So that's that's in your capital facilities plan. So your capital facilities plan identified the facilities projected in the next 10 years and all their costs associated with it. Now, it doesn't get all the way down to the level of pickleball because you may want to move that around, but it gives a pretty good estimate of what we're anticipating. So for instance, we know we're woefully inadequate with parks on the southeast side of Washington Fields, and we're hearing it from our residents.
Yeah, we are.
And we have some land that we think maybe BLM land that we can swap around or get at an RPMP, so it's pretty inexpensive. But the capital facilities plan, and that's why the work is always in the capital facilities plan, and you all have put great work in the capital facilities plan. That's where the details without getting all the way minute becomes the details.
And I would add too, in that number, so we calculate $307,000 per acre for an improved park. Where that $307,000 per acre comes from is a review of the bid tabulations that we, Sunrise, of projects that we've completed in the last 10 years that then give us an idea of a typical neighborhood park, for example, includes 4 acres or less. There's a pavilion, there's a restroom building, there's typically a court complex of some kind, whether it's pickleball or basketball or volleyball court. It's a playground on, and so kind of that neighborhood park. And then there are the field type parks that the cost per acre is typically a little bit less on those facilities than it is on a neighborhood park, just because you have more space with fewer improvements or cheaper improvements per acre. And so we take that information that we have and blend that together and then come up with the $307,000 an acre. So there is data for a well-developed park, not an extravagant park, and not just a runway park, as we call them, with a flat plain with grass in
Do
it.
we define that somewhere?
It's in the report in the appendix. There's a list of the costs per project. We don't go into great depth on what the projects were as far as the improvements that were made in them, but they are identified as the
So when you
type
say
of park.
well-developed, sort of developed, partially developed, developed for a big, do I know what those standards are?
It's not spelled
Obviously, I
out to
don't
that
know.
degree in the
Yeah.
plan, no, but it is.
And parks give you the flexibility to decide what that means.
That's right. If we nail it down too tight, then you don't have the flexibility going forward to spend them where you need them and to meet the requests of your
Well,
population.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that that limits our flexibility so much as it creates an image for us of really what are we talking about
Yeah.
when we talk about that.
To answer your question, the parks that you have now are nice. They're nice, average to good parks. So they'd be really inconsistent with what we commonly see. And wonderful facilities. The Sullivan Soccer Complex is a beautiful facility. Lots of great amenities there. The cost per acre on that one's going to be just a little bit higher than that average, probably.
Yes, I have one more question. This is a master plan, and really it's coming down to how much do we put into impact fee. But we've talked before about the need for neighborhood parks. But we don't have that in our master plan. We don't have that in our standard. The standard hasn't changed, but we've talked about what is possible to do in 2 acres or an acre and a half to promote neighborhoods and communality in those neighborhoods. Is this the place where we get a proposal before the city council to say, let's change that?
Yeah, that would be you driving that with the city council, because that it will be, well, two things to that. One is we've got to make sure that we recognize that an exaction, we got to be careful with the exaction. So not every neighborhood necessarily we can demand that out, because that could be determined to be an
Not
illegal
suggesting
exaction.
that, yeah.
But on the other hand, yes, it would be a shift. So our standard right now for city parks is 4 acres or more. But, and I know what you're saying, you're not suggesting that we take those, but in order to kind of drive, I think anytime we've had, I know you guys, every time we've had a PCD or a PUD, you're trying to do that already. And under PUDs and PCDs, you have that option. Again, you'll have to design, how many acres requires this. And then again, that's going to be coming at an exaction to the developer too, which is not too different than an impact fee in a different way. But that will have to be determined by policy. Because right now, that's not been our policy. We're now kind of moving our way there by even doing an inventory of the private parks and trails. Remember, this is all trail stuff as well. So all of our disconnected trails, that's one of the things that I think we need to put attention on, is we got all these fragmented trails, and in part because development, and many times we can't force them to do it and other things, and so that's that. Sorry.
So how do we get a proposal of some sort in front of the council?
For the council proposal.
Proposing.
Sounds like she's proposing.
Let's get it on the agenda, we can do
Yeah.
something with.
Would you make a note of that, Tara? Any other questions? Maury, I think you wanted to make a comment. Come on up.
Hi, Mari Crashwood, Southern Utah Home Builders Association. Thank you for giving me a couple of minutes to make a couple comments regarding this impact fees. I appreciate that they talked about, where we're at currently, 3,700, and then the maximum allowable, if approved by the council, would increase to 6,295. Exactly right. In the past, usually the council has not adopted maximum allowable, which is a really good thing. When we saw this study, we were concerned because that would be a $2,600 increase. And Washington City already is one of the highest as far as impact fees overall. And I think, over the years it changes, but right now, housing affordability is such a hot topic. I serve on a committee with the county. We're going to be doing public forums and different things and brainstorming ideas. But definitely, every time impact fees increase, it affects that price. Average price for a new home right now is $375,000. For attached is about $290,000. And I think that was like a 15% increase over last year. And so we are concerned. We hope that Washington City sees SUBA as a resource, and we have a consultant that we use, and we actually had them review this impact fee study. We had just less than 2 weeks to review it, but there are some concerns and questions that we have about this study, and I do have a letter today to give to the city manager and the council. If you'd like, I could read it right now to bring up those concerns. Or if you want to review it later, we would ask that you postpone any vote on this study until those concerns are addressed. Of course, if there's no proposal increase, then, the concerns are irrelevant. Yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm
So-
kind of fascinated in what concerns you might have with a study that's just looking at the options. I mean, because that's really what the study is just talking about levels of service and what we can do.
Yeah.
If we keep it at where we're at or if we move it. I'd be interested to know what the concerns are.
Yeah, and there's different calculations involved, and so it's not that long. I can mention there's really 5 points, if that's okay, just real fast. Okay. Let's see, number one, there is no analysis of the funding for all the existing parks except those who have outstanding debt service. That's
because of like Roger said, we're using this for new parks. That's all we're allowed to use it for,
Right.
is for new parks.
Exactly. This is important because in theory, the parks and park improvements which were donated to the city should be credited to all residents and not counted as the level of service, establishing the 3 acre per 1,000 residents. This could have an impact on the fees paid. And then number 2, the city is projecting to collect roughly $2.3 million per year in impact fees. This would more than cover the expenses for the parks to be constructed in the next several years without going into debt for the park expansions. If the city could plan their projects instead of constructing 4 parks in 1 year, it would save roughly $2.5 million in financing fees. So you already talked about this, as far as how many parks to put in an annual time frame. Number 3, the recreation center is admittedly benefiting non-residents at 32%. This number has not changed since the 2014 impact fee studies. However, the full cost for the remaining debt service is being charged against impact fees. Impact fees should only be covering 68% of the total cost for the facility. So we would just like a further explanation on that. And then number 4, the city is paying roughly about $40,000 plus every 4 to 5 years on an impact fee study. This seems unusually high for a park's impact fee. Most are around $10,000, and I believe that's a statewide figure. Water, sewer, and other studies often cost much more because actual design work occurs as opposed to parks, especially given the dramatic similarities between this study and the study that was done in 2014. If the city is paying approximately $40,000 per document, did it take 300 to 400 hours to complete? And that's just a consideration. And then the last thing, number 5, the trail cost per mile seems high to us. The cost for acreage for parks is $25,000, but closer to $46,000 per mile for trails. There is nothing to back up this number, so we would just like that identified. The asphalt seems expensive with a trail cost of $100 per linear foot. One of the largest heavy construction services company that is here locally stated it should be closer to $25 to $35 per foot. This includes asphalt and road base for a 10-foot wide trail. Are there other improvements included in the $100 per linear foot? So those are just 5 considerations. Before you discuss this and vote on it. And so I would be happy to leave this letter and then maybe it could be addressed back to
I'd like
us.
to know that local construction company because we'll hold them to that $35 figure.
Sunrock.
Oh, thank you. Good to know. Next time they bid it, we'll say, hey, you told us $35 a square foot.
Actually, I don't even
Well-
want to go that far. I'm gonna have Mike look it up here on the next, to see if they've honored that, 'cause I highly doubt that.
Well, that's just a number that we were given. And not to say there might be other things included that weren't identified into the study. So we understand all of these numbers can fluctuate.
I think that it was pretty well explained where those numbers came from, and that's from past jobs that they've had bid. So
Yeah.
they've taken those tabulated over the last several years.
Yeah.
And said, here's about what the going rate is. Today it's one rate, tomorrow it's a little different.
Yeah.
Changing landscape. Anyway, it's in the bid.
But I would like to
Exactly.
see a copy of your letter. And
Yeah.
I would like to point out with the community center, our neighboring city creates all kinds of facilities in order to draw people to this area.
Mhm.
Okay, that aren't residents, but it's the residents that are paying for all of those facilities. And it's a very common practice in this area to do that because we live on tourism dollars and seek tourism dollars.
Mhm.
And so to say the community center shouldn't do that when we know that we can't charge enough fees at the community center to pay for those costs. And I don't believe that golf courses are a good example of that. We really do that as much to attract people and for our citizens. And I think that that's an incredibly common practice. And I would challenge you to show us that that's not a common practice, that any city is paying for all their facilities and not allowing people that aren't citizens to use those facilities, and that they can cover the cost with their fee structures, because I don't believe that that's true.
Yeah, and the impact fee, the Utah Impact Fee Act, there are certain regulations and stipulations when it goes into figuring numbers. And so that's where that came from. But, one thing too, I wanted to point out, it's been a long time since I've been here. And we definitely want us to be partners with the city and just use us as a resource. So we're not here, to say, no, don't do it, because if there's a need and the citizens want it, that's great. We're just here to bring another side and concerns, questions
Well, and I
that can be
appreciate the depth of
researched.
your study and of your letter, and you've had a little time even to do that. That's going to be useful, and we should read it and study it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll get a copy. I'm not concerned about any of the 5 that she's had there. And as a matter of fact, we'll get those responded to, and it probably should be fairly quickly and get it back to you. The most important thing we do here is try to estimate as accurately as possible to the vision that the council has, and then who covers cost. We can, if the estimates come accurately, and you are empowered to kind of make sure that it's equitable to all parties, including the builders, including the residents, and including others. And so that's our whole goal here, is to find out how accurate is it. And I'm pretty comfortable with Sunrise's ability to probably be able to answer these questions, probably to your satisfaction. And if not, to make the adjustments they need to. And then when we get as accurate as possible, it's for the council to say, okay, that we can accept. This is how we're funding it to be the most equitable to the individual. Because if the numbers are correct, it's just a matter of who you're shifting the cost to, if you want that. I was going to mention too, that a number of years ago, and this is important because I think Washington's been known for this. About 4 or 5 years ago, we did a survey with our citizens, and it was pretty good response. Number 1 reason people moved to Washington City, schools. Number 2, parks. And so parks are high for us, and we've always had a good reputation with parks. And so we just want to make sure that we maintain that proposal. Now, again, we're trying to define that to mean, well, we've got all these other things out there that add value too, and that's why we've asked Sunrise to kind of quantify the other value items, which we've never done before. And I think they've done a nice job with that, because it was a tough thing we asked them to do. So we just want to make sure that we present it, and that was the reason for the salad bowl here, to say, here's what we got. If we can sign off at some point that the numbers are as accurate as they possibly can be by anybody looking into the future, then this is what this means. This is what your choices will be. So I think we're good with that.
And
some of
one
those
thing too, I want to
questions-
compliment all of you on is the commercial, because I know we've talked over the years, definitely Washington City has higher impact fees, but in the past you've mentioned, we don't have a lot of commercial, and we've seen a lot of change in that direction. So you guys are doing a wonderful job.
And
So
remember,
thank you.
commercial doesn't pay park impact. They can't.
Yeah.
So we get
But other
nothing from
impact
commercial.
fees, it does.
Yeah,
So,
that's, Mark,
okay.
I'll tell you where I come up on this thing, and this is the challenge that I have as a council
Mhm.
member. Is because really what we're talking about is creating quality of life for our citizens.
Mhm.
And so at what level do we create that quality of life? And you bring up a great point of affordability. And that's, where does the
Yeah, it's a fine
balance,
line.
of what quality of life do we need to maintain or build out there? And at what price can we afford to do that at? And it's a challenge as a council member to look at that, because I look at this and say, for quality of life purposes, it ought to all be built.
Mhm.
I mean, the trails and the parks are going to make a great quality of life for my kids and my grandkids to come and walk and hike and play and do all. Well, affordability says we probably can't do that.
And that's where your
And that's the
children will
challenge.
probably have to move
Exactly.
somewhere else
But,
to
I
enjoy
find it
their
interesting
parks.
You brought up the fact of in the last year, there's been a 15% increase in the price of housing.
Yeah, it's
What's our
huge.
impact fee done?
Yeah.
There's zero of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I start looking at that and say, okay. the
But you
impact
have
fee
to
is
look at
important.
growth too. You're collecting a lot in impact fees.
Well,
So
but
it's a balance.
All those go to quality of life, whether it's
Yeah.
roads, whether it's sewers, whether
Yeah.
it's park. I mean, it all goes to quality of life issues there. And it's
Exactly.
As a council member, it's
Yeah.
a challenge for you to say, okay,
Yeah.
what's the most important and at what price?
Marty,
Right.
let me answer real quick, because it's important perspective-wise on the community center. You're looking at the debt that the community center has, not the total cost. It was a $16 million facility,
Mm-hmm.
in which Washington City put $10 million
Mhm.
in cash. So what percentage is that? That is
I'm not getting it now.
60-70%
Yeah.
has been paid. So the remainder
Mhm.
is impact fee eligible, because Washington City already put 70% of that. You're just looking at
Yeah.
the debt and saying, oh, the debt should be split up. You need to look at the total facility.
Yeah.
And this whole facility is
And
already
maybe our consultant missed that. So, okay. All right.
It occurs to me that some of these questions were not really questions for the council so much as they were for Sunrise. Do we
Well,
want
what
to give,
we'll do is
we
we'll
want to
give
give
them
them?
to Sunrise.
Yeah.
Most of them were. and then we'll give them to Sunrise, and they'll respond, give answers to the council.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you for all you
Thanks,
do.
Maury.
We
You bet.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, I would add, this, so this is fairly normal, and we're happy to respond to the letter. We can just get a copy of it, and we'll, now, you do have on your agenda tomorrow night, I believe, a public hearing, and then on the council agenda, whether or not to adopt an impact fee. My understanding is that it is. Would you like us to just not be here tomorrow night and come the following time, give us some opportunity to respond to the letter, or should we show up and we're happy to be here and see what the council wants to do at
Is there
that
any
time?
urgency to passing this?
I think we're having a public hearing. I would like to have you here because a lot of those questions we're going to look to you at.
We'll be happy to be here. You bet.
And if we've noticed a public hearing, we might as well have a public hearing.
And then if you decide to table the vote on the impact fee, we're happy to come back next month or whatever.
Yeah,
a couple of
that's,
weeks.
yeah, the council can always make the decision. We've actually carried this on for what, since May?
Been a while.
So
yeah,
that we
yeah.
could get these little
Yeah.
pieces put in place.
Yeah.
So, and again, the fact of the matter is we are just sitting where we're at right now. So
Sure.
we're not changed.
Yep, no harm done.
We're getting closer.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks again, Maury. Glad to have you here. Item 6, discussion for the possibility to structure a process to reduce or waive impact fees on a Habitat for Humanity home located in Washington City.
Oh, this might be a quick one now.
We're pretty used to it.
Okay, then this will be quick. What you are looking at is a draft document on something that the city manager and myself have been working on in regards to a request by a nonprofit organization seeking or having consideration for either a impact fee, since we're talking about impact fees, impact fee deferral or impact fee waiver. The nonprofit organization is Habitat for Humanity. What you have is just kind of a game plan or strategy that we can kind of chew on and kind of think about how we would like to structure this as we consider this request. And there will probably be other requests as we press forward. You've got your objectives, which is again, development criteria of what would qualify for a fee waiver or deferral. And then the goal, obviously, like mentioned prior, is to try and increase affordable housing opportunities for those in our city. The red font or the red highlights, you can turn to the back. That second page is just a sample of what a building permit looks like as far as fees. This was taken on a permit that was issued today. So it is current as we can be. What you find is the highlighted portions are the portions that are directly affected by the city, whether it's review, whether it's inspections, whether it's impact fees on power, on water, on streets, on parks, and on public safety. So on the average, you're looking at about a $15,377 amount on just a standard home on a building permit. Obviously, this does not include the Water Conservancy District fee, but you
That's
have.
on top of this.
That's on top of this. Yeah, it's on top of this. Just for clarification, the top item that's not highlighted, I think that's a 386 number and 34 cents. That is an impact fee for the HCP or the reserve.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What does the ESI stand for?
That is a 1% fee to the value of the property that's sent to this, a value of the project that's sent to the state. So whatever we do or whatever value we establish, there's that 1% that needs to go towards the state for that fee.
Yeah.
The ESI is that HCP.
She's asked what ESI stands for.
Oh, ESI is,
Environmental sensitive,
Yeah.
impact or something.
I think it's our software. I think it's our software system that generates these things.
I think it's, something to do with the environmental sensitive.
It should be HCP. It'd be a whole lot easier, like less confusion that way.
Yeah.
Just to simplify things. But yeah, so that's what that is up top.
Well, then for sure we should have trails in
Water parks. And then we'll probably have that discussion for another day, another time on the HCP. What you have is that paragraph is basically stating that we can put some verbiage in place on what fees we can consider as a deferral or a waiver and what fees we cannot, because it's not coming from our requirements. On the next section is just some ideas, some bullet points on what we could consider as criteria to be considered as a waiver or as a deferral. You can kind of just go through those bullet points. It's pretty much self-explanatory.
Well, on this, must live or work in Washington County, how does a nonprofit organization live or work?
The tenant, the applicant. Yeah, the applicant. So,
Okay, got it.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, good question. Do you want me to review that, or you want to just fire me with questions if you have any? Again, these are just ideas. This is not hard and fast.
So one of the things that the council actually kind of commissioned us to do when we had the discussion with Habitat for Humanity is to see a couple things. And really the Habitat for Humanity discussion is a little bit off to the side for a minute, but to rather try to come back with some discussion regarding a criteria if we wanted to address affordable housing, okay? Affordable housing is best addressed in our position in kind of almost a case by case and not an across the board. Because the problem is sometimes the challenges with across the board is you don't really promote affordable housing, you increase margins for people. So we really want to address them on a case by case. So this is, what Matt's presenting here is kind of at least the beginning. There was some question, if you remember last time, about, well, what is the AMI for our area? And our plan defines that. And so his bullet point on the AMI comes out of our affordable housing plan, which you guys adopted a couple years ago or a year ago. So these are just, again, part of the draft discussion that we wanted to kind of get in front of you, let you guys kind of begin to mull it over and go from there. And again, the philosophy with Washington City has always been, because we believe in the integrity of our impact fees, we have always indicated that there would never be just a unilateral waiving of impact fee, because that is a disservice to the people who are served by that impact
Correct.
fee, that the city would have to find the funds to compensate that impact.
I noticed a couple of definitions I think we need here. Repayment penalty if sold before maturity date or end of contract. I don't know what that maturity date is or what the contract's going to say.
It's a good question. What that is just a statement. That maturity date will depend on what the contract we agree to. That's just a concept. It's not so much drilled down to specific what that might look like. That's pretty much generated by this body. You will decide what that would look like.
And one of it that we talked about was must be primary resident for at least
X
years.
Yeah, you can place
That's
that.
the recapture program. So
Yeah.
that's that final point would be the recapture. So if you're not the primary resident for so long, there's a recapture on the part of the city.
Doesn't Habitat for Humanity have
What's that? Sorry.
don't they have a statute that you have to live in that
Yes.
home for X amount of years? before you
Yes,
can-
yes. So I think that's why the question or the bullet point up top, qualified programs offered by established nonprofit entities. Because nonprofit entities, I guess I'm looking at not to recreate the wheel.
Right.
If someone like a Habitat for Humanity has something already in place with strict guidelines, we can look at their guidelines and maybe adapt a few of our own to add to make us feel comfortable. But someone that just decided, well, I'm doing nonprofit because there's a program that Washington City has, and I'm going to start it today and come to the city for qualification in this program, we may not want to consider that proposal.
So we're doing the qualifying.
Correct. We control the whole
Okay,
thing.
so we're saying Washington City qualified programs.
Correct.
Okay, and then on the proper maintenance,
I just threw that in
no,
just.
I mean, it's good, except you're gonna have to define it.
Exactly. And that will be something that we'd work on in a code or an ordinance on what that looks like. Yeah, because we do want it to be at a standard.
Well, it's, I mean, you really have your standards. Code enforcement has them. In some cases, but I think in this case, you would just enforce those
Mhm.
rather than waiting for maybe a neighbor to call and complain about
Correct.
property.
And I think we can look at what we currently have on the books and see if there's some opportunities to upgrade or update some of those, requirements that we currently have to fit the program that you are designing.
I'm going to say how many vehicles they can have parked on the lawn.
Yeah, only one that's not running. Just kidding. Any questions? Just again, as a side note, our Affordable Housing Plan 2017 is in the process of being updated. We are required to do that at the end of this year, December 2019. So we're working on this. So as we do this and continue to get something that we all are happy with, that can be implemented into our program to upgrade our current program that we have, along with other things that we might be working on.
Well, I'll mention as
Manager.
well is Drew Ellerman has actually formed a committee that involves both builders, developers, and others to address the affordable housing issue. And I'm hoping to have some report back to you by the 1st of October with respect to that. So that should sync perfectly with whatever kind of input you might get from them that might be of value that you want implementing the plan.
And I think myself, maybe Drew, also, I think one or two of you, I know Councilmember Bellison has attended that same group that the county is putting together to look at and address affordable housing and trying to keep us all on the same page with SUBA. Any questions?
Well, I was just going to make a statement. If the Southern Utah Home Builders Association wants to read over this and weigh in, I'd love to hear your email. And you mentioned
I will send it to her.
partnership and
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll send her a copy
or for that matter, anyone else
for sure.
wants to weigh in on some points, give some feedback as we're contemplating this issue.
Any other
If I was to-
questions?
If I was to watch a video on home ownership education, I wonder what I would learn.
Even home maintenance, I clipped out of a magazine once a list of all the things that I should be doing annually, and I think, oh my gosh.
Again, suggestions.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your efforts on that.
My neighbor hit me up the other day. She said she was asking for some help with her changing out her filter. She wasn't able to get up to change out her air filter. She said, I think that's why my air conditioning's not working. And I said, I'm pretty sure I can assure you, if you've changed it every month this summer, that I've tested in my house that that's not the case. And I think you need to have a repairman come out.
Actually, I did just have a repairman out this week, and actually often it is that those filters are the really good filters.
Yeah.
They don't let enough air flow, and they're not being changed off.
But she was changing it every month. So I assured her that I tested that to make sure that that wasn't the case.
All right, item 7, discussion of proposed striping of Green Springs Drive.
This is good. Where do we go with this next? Are you gonna keep working with this?
With Matt, yeah.
So again, even because they have been in attendance, so let me just point this out too. This is still a little apart from the Habitat for Humanity thing. This is kind of discussing a policy. I would still like to come back and visit that issue. That would be more of a budgetary discussion because of we hadn't had it carved out. So I think what we'd like you to do is take a couple weeks, we'll put it back on the next workshop agenda, and hopefully then take it to the next.
All right.
Where Matt stepped out, I see the things that they have listed on here as far as recommendations.
On the draft?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would be helpful for them to delineate the things that they're trying to solve by each of those. Maybe not even need to be.
When you refer to they, who?
Well,
'Cause this is
the
our list.
proposer of the draft.
Yeah, this is us.
I
So
realize
we
it's
can-
us, but as staff, I guess, Matt and whoever he's having work on this.
Yeah, yeah, that's not a problem. I think that's fairly simple. As a matter of fact, we could go.
Well, I think some of them are obvious.
Yeah.
But in some cases, we're intending to try and avoid this, and so we propose this. But just thinking about how those line up, you know.
Yeah, that's easy. We can do that. That's not a problem. I was going to mention that with homeownership, the homeownership, this was actually one that Matt added, but I actually like it because, so we've got a neighboring community just to the east of us that require this on all now transactions because those people have never had mortgages in their life. And there's nuances to mortgages that people need to understand now. In our affordable housing, that can very much be the same issue. And what it does is it kind of just provides some understanding about how to deal with home mortgages and those type of things. So easily done, Councilman. We'll do that for the next, we'll get that done for you.
Okay, we done with that one? Okay, Councilwoman Granger, I'll let you lead out.
Well, when that striping was occurred and needed to for safety issues, but it was 5 lanes as it has always been on Green Springs. And part of my question was why? Because it's a community road. And my thoughts that would it be better if it was 3-lane with a passing lane in the center, or with a turning lane in the center, and the wider lanes on the side, which would give us the space to put the bike lanes in there. And my rationale for considering that we talk about that, and it would have to be approved by the council. The reason not to, I suppose, is whatever traffic studies might show. The reasons to do it are because that's as wide as Washington Parkway is going to be, and I don't see why Green Springs needs to be wider. And what I've noticed, and I've been watching, is that the cars don't go the speed limit because they can pass whatever cars in front of them because it's 5 lanes. And at its longest, it's 2 miles exactly to where the Washington Parkway would be. But the last half a mile of that is just along the golf course and the to-be hotel, I think. And so, and it widens up there for the intersection. So we're really talking about, can we go the speed limit for 1.5 miles and slow that traffic down? And I think if we were to look at how fast cars are going along Green Springs, they're going too fast. And we don't really need it to be that wide. And I don't know why through a community it's needed to be that wide. So I've not reached a conclusion about that. I just asked for us to please talk about this and see if we can study this and see if there's something logical here that needs to occur. And the one logical thing for me is slow that traffic down, turn it into a community road. Don't make it a major freeway if the Northern Corridor ever goes in and attaches to Washington Parkway. Discourage that as being a shortcut to Green Springs off of the Northern Corridor. And of course, the other part of that is move the Northern Corridor so it never does attach to the Washington Parkway. Just all part of the discussion, and I just wanted to ask for a discussion. Maybe that Mike has some more things that he wants to add to that. So.
Yeah, I think from staff standpoint, again, the standard has been set by previous councils with regards to traffic. I think Mike can show that traffic meets that, and probably with the proposed will exceed that, but certainly this council has the ability to change that, but we would probably request that the council change that standard so that it's unilateral. But that's what we go off of. We go off the established standards, and I think our traffic numbers, and Mike can share those tonight, and that's really all staff has to say about that. That's why that road's met that qualification. Council can then determine, do we want it to be something different?
And let me just add this to the top of it. The top of those 2 miles is where all the new construction has gone on, and there's a lot of construction traffic on that road. I noticed the other morning when I was out walking, which would have been around 7 or 7:30, that every vehicle but one was a construction vehicle.
Most of that construction vehicle will be replaced with automobiles as soon as they're completed. So Mike, go ahead. I think with at least that, and that's what we just want to present.
Yeah, so we actually went out and did a count prior to the meeting here. And we had a count from 2017 it's kind of skewed a little bit because right now is in the middle of summer, we're in our lower traffic movement because we don't have snowbirds here. We don't have as many vacationers here. So we're a little bit lower than I expected, but right now we're running about 8,000 cars a day, our average for the week. So we did count for a week, long period, and the average is just almost 8,000 cars per day. In 20.
Where did you measure that?
At Cove Drive. So we didn't catch any of the traffic below Cove Drive. So if there's been construction traffic going to the hotel side or the gas station, so those weren't counted in.
So you were above the
Cove
golf
Drive.
course?
No, right at the beginning of the golf course. So the first development. And we were actually above Cove Drive, so we didn't capture the residents that live on Cove Drive. Goes up onto the
What you
lands right there.
captured?
But we captured the majority,
The golf course.
the golf
traffic,
course traffic, yes.
Which is limited. But
So, we're about 8,000 cars a day last week, and we measured it again in April of 2017, and we're just a little over 7,000 cars a day. So, our standards that we go by is, and that Green Springs is, get these out so I can even read it. Green Springs is classified as a major arterial, and the designs for that is 6,000 to 20,000 cars a day. The next classification down is a 66-foot collector, and that can be either a 3-lane or a 4-lane in the 66-foot. 4-lane not having a center turn lane. That's 2,010 cars to 6,000 cars per day. So,
can I point out that some of those lanes, you told me the smallest was 11. Was it yards or feet?
11. Oh, lane
Wide.
width?
Yeah.
Yeah, our problem that we had with Green Springs is our lane width. I believe we're 11-foot lanes.
Okay, you have some
Which-
10-foot.
We probably do have
Do.
some 10-foot. So Main Street, we've gone down to 10-foot lanes on Main Street to do the traffic calming. So our problem, why we were not able to stripe Green Springs, it was laid out in our active transportation plans because all he looked at was the classification of the road. And if we'd had the full width of asphalt, we could have striped it in, narrowed our lanes down. It already has narrowed lanes. I couldn't narrow any more to fit in the bike lanes. Our only option was eliminate the center turn lane or eliminate lanes. So
From what I heard, and that's why I'm gonna ask for clarification, your biggest concern is the speeds being traveled, not necessarily the bikes being able to ride.
Yeah, I mean, the bikes are an issue for some people, and they feel that there's been some danger and that, I guess Bruce Wilson's name was brought to me that he almost got hit the other day because there are some blind corners there, but yeah, it's slowing down that
It's the
traffic.
speed that's
Mhm.
the issue.
and with the bike, so we've come up with an alternative, not to use Green Springs, but to come over and use Fairway Drive and
So
Quail Ridge
what would
Drive.
be some other options to traffic calming here, Mike? I mean, obviously, it sounds like that's kind of the biggest.
Well, we've
problem
already
we're
got the
looking
narrowed
at.
lanes, but I mean, there's not a whole lot left because we don't have the right of way.
Well,
So our
what I
issue
look
is-
at, and I don't know, maybe it doesn't, I mean, that bottom, one, we got the median that kind of pinches in there.
Right.
Could you put medians up? Would that have a tendency, or is the fact of already striping what it is?
But we
make
could,
the effect
we
of
could
what a
put
median
medians up the center of the road. We definitely
Would
could put
that,
medians
would that
up.
make any difference?
That's-
Since it's already striped the way it is, we've already got those widths, it's not gonna call
Right.
traffic per se.
Yeah, well, I mean, landscape center medians have a tendency to calm traffic. Moving the road around, which it moves around, it jogs in and out and curves, those calm traffic. Our bulb outs that we're doing on Main Street, well, we just don't have the right of way to do those at intersections. We're really limited on our right of way width.
I want to see that we're dealing with some facts here. Can you provide to the council the average speeds that you're recording as well?
We can. I don't have those.
I think that's important that those speeds get put in there, that the council see what those speeds are, because we've got to put in perspective what this means.
Well, the fact is, if any neighborhood you go into, speed's an issue. It doesn't matter where we go in our community, we hear about speed.
Well, I've always
They
said.
are, there is a problem there, and I suggest, especially in this long, straight road, has a tendency to speed them up. And so I can certainly appreciate where Councilwoman Granger's coming from with that. I don't know what our options, like I said, to me, it's worth explore possible options that may slow it down a little bit. Maybe some good speed bumps in the right places.
Heavy enforcement.
Well, I'm for that as well. I think we should have some tools at our disposal as a city to address some of these problem areas and bring them into alignment. It's been a number of years, but I used to cycle straight up that road. And I tell you, even though there was less of a shoulder, I felt safer south of Telegraph than I did north of Telegraph on that road. That's as an aggressive of a road, I think, as I've ever been on in Washington
Yeah,
State.
south of Telegraph's wider, quite a bit wider road.
Well, but you don't, as a cyclist, you don't have much, you got a
There is no shoulder.
crummy little curb over there, and you're, yeah, when you get north of Telegraph, those folks are fairly aggressive on that.
The biggest
Green Springs
concern I would have with restricting lanes is the fact that we really only have north of the freeway 3 different alternatives to get people under the freeway or through the freeway. That would be Green Springs, Main Street, and our 1300. And so you kind of, if you restrict that, what does it do to our traffic abilities? People that, I can tell you the last few days out in the fields have been a very interesting scenario with all of a sudden the new schools opening up. And watching that traffic, it's happened because there's only one lane in each direction. And now it's a disaster out there. Hopefully it'll clean itself up as people learn, different routes and some things to do there. But it's been very interesting to see what happens with one lane and all of a sudden you put a lot of traffic into it. In fact, I kind of thought it'd be fun to have another public hearing and talk about, we don't mind driving to that gas station over there. Because they sure been complaining the last 2 days a lot. But anyway, no, I certainly can appreciate that. I do have some concerns with going to just one lane in each direction for that very reason. It's what futuristically, and maybe it works for today, and then the day comes, the traffic is stacking up and we have a traffic problem, you restripe it again and say, okay, we're back to.
We're at the bottom level of that range you mentioned. I think you said
Today we are,
5,000.
you're right.
Six
That's what
to
I'm saying,
20,000.
6,000 to 20,000, is that what it was? I don't know the answer here. I just think that it'll be interesting to see how fast you think they're going, because I try to go the speed limit and they're all passing me.
Those counters give us speeds on them.
Yes.
I remember, I think, they'll tell you how fast.
Mhm. I'm not sure, but I think with our council, all he has to do is put in a different request, and I think it actually might have picked up speeds. It depends on how they laid the loops
Laid it
out.
out.
Well, I wanted the input from the council on this one, because I didn't know the answer. I figure if we reduce the lanes in a road, that's an unusual thing to do, and I'm the one that'll take it on the chin when people want to go faster and pass, and those few bikers that, of course, none of them are using that fairway route. They're all on Green Springs. Okay.
It'd be interesting to know what would, it'd be nice to see a crystal ball and see if it did have those wider lanes, just 3 lanes, what the speeds would do. Because generally you have a tendency to speed up, even though it's one lane, and you'll see them passing in the median.
But they'll have people turning right that they'll have to stop.
I just, like I said, it'd be nice to have a crystal ball and see.
Well,
Yeah, that's what happens when you do that.
True. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman. It's a good point of discussion. It really is.
So I don't know where we go with this now.
Well, I'll get the
I think we'll have
speeds.
Mike get the speeds.
We'll get the speeds and we can bring it, or I can get it to Roger and he can share it with the council.
I think some of
Take
them at 7 o'clock when those,
We take it 24 hours a day.
do you?
Yep. So you'll get the counts, you'll get the high speeds, you'll get the average speeds, but so it counts through the day and it'll show you, we can do it by the high speeds in this hour will show. Interesting, on Fields Road, we did Fields Road years ago before we actually widened the bridge going across the river. And at 10 o'clock at night, almost every night, we had somebody that was over 100 miles an hour.
We get
I
that.
bet they're more than that now, because I can hear
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's drag racing that goes on after 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
out there, 'cause
on those
you can
straightaways.
Wind them up.
I think
Oh, I
that's
wish
true.
that's 17 again.
I think that's true.
Thanks, Mike. All right, move on to item 8, discussion of proposed budget amendment. Kimberly?
Mayor and council, it's good to see you again tonight. To clarify an earlier question, I did look it up and find out that the ESI is the endangered species impact. So through the habitat conservation plan. So, yes.
Well, he was close.
Yeah. So this,
That little wasp that's going to be in that property is endangered. He will be when I spray it.
It's the green stink bugs.
Trump's working on that. He's gonna fix that.
So tonight, then, what we have is this proposed budget amendment for you guys to look at. In your packet, you should have received an executive summary where I tried to highlight the major components of that, as well as a summary that identified the individual accounts where those changes were taking place. The overall impact on this budget amendment would be about $766,434. If you want, I'll go through the items that I identified on the background and the information associated with that. So the bulk of it, which covering a little more than half of that, is related to the capital equipment purchases that were approved as part of the original budget. So this was for the golf course as well as the parks. So in the original budget, we did have these items that were approved for acquisition. What the $402,000 change is an accounting standard. So in governmental accounting, which the parks and the golf course belong to, I have to actually budget for the revenue of the loan proceeds coming in, as well as an expense for the acquisition of the equipment. And then so basically this amendment includes a new revenue resource saying, hey, we're borrowing the money as originally planned, and then here we're buying it. What was included in the budget as the original expense was only the annual payment towards that, which is how we would account for it on an enterprise side of things.
So in reality, it's just paperwork.
That's right.
issue. We're
On
not
that,
spending
that's
any
right.
more money.
It's
We're
it's
not
what you guys
spending anything.
originally requested on there. For that, I did point out though in the second note that I had, because I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that, in the documentation that was presented to the council on the equipment items, I had all the individual items listed out that were included in that, but I neglected to include the small rough mower for the golf course. That's $33,000. So it was not on the original list, but it was part of the original calculation for the annual payment that we anticipated for borrowing the money. So I did identify that. That amount is included in the $402,000 that's associated there.
So there again, just a clarification. Paperwork.
Correct. We didn't want to feel like
Not
we,
increasing
that,
anything.
right, that there's an invoice that comes forward and you see that acquisition and it wasn't individually detailed on that list we had presented. And so I wanted to include that so you guys would be aware and feel like that was all forward. And then Kevin at the golf course has presented a plan to administration for some marketing at the golf course for a hole-in-one. And they have identified a particular hole in the department there that they would like to be able to install a live feed camera that is monitored. But basically through this hole-in-one program, a small amount of the money is set aside for everybody who plays on the course, and it builds up to a certain level depending on what they tee off. If they get a hole-in-one on that, they can kind of win this jackpot prize associated with that.
Which hole?
13. 15.
15?
Do you want to come up, Kevin?
So we've had 4 hole-in-ones on 5. We've had 1 on 2 and 3 on 17 and 0 on 15.
None on
which
15?
Is
That's
stunning.
the easy one.
Yeah, you would think
The
so.
last one?
15 we haven't had this year. So historically, it's the lowest hole-in-one.
Andy Palmer hit that 2 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, I got
I was
one about
there.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
But very seldom. But the reason we want to do
Really?
this is from a marketing standpoint. So when I took over, I went through our website and it was just horrible. I mean, it was terrible. So I got with Steve and IT. They've been fixing everything, but what I want is a live feed, because everybody I talk to, so for me, I'm a snowboarder. When it starts snowing, I get on the webcams of the resorts I like to go to every single day. You want to see what it's snowing, you want to see the sunshine, you want to see if people are there, you just want to see it. Well, everybody calls us at the golf course in the February, January, December, all those kind of things, and they go, how's the weather? We're coming in 2 weeks, we can't wait, we hope it's going to be good. So I talked to Steve even before I took over about putting a webcam that showed our putting green area. And all I want to do is drive people to the website so they'll do just what I do. They log on every day, they look at our webcam, they see 15, which is beautiful. It's got the pond, it's going to be facing Pine Valley Mountain. But every day they get on there and they look, they're sitting in their office, it's snowing outside, and they can see what Green Spring Golf Course is. Well, a year ago, I read an article about Swing Kings, who they're the biggest company in the United States that does hole-in-one contests. Well, one of the options is an ongoing to every customer. Most people do it for tournaments or charities or something like that. So I started looking into it, and they have a live feed so they can verify it. So I called them and I says, can we tap into that and put it on our webpage? He says, we'd encourage it, no problem whatsoever. Well, the cost is $1 per person we pay them. So it's going to be $30,000 a year. You have to sign a 3-year contract. And if it increases play like it's supposed to, it could be up to $40,000. That's a lot of money for us to spend, but it gives me my webcam. So I got with Steve and talked to him about doing the same thing. So we can do for about $4,000, buy the equipment, buy the cameras, and a year's worth of internet service for about $4,000. But then I started thinking about that hole-in-one contest. So everyone I talk to about it thinks it's a great idea, me included. We could implement and own the hole-in-one contest by ourselves. So we're not paying them the $30,000 or $40,000. We can just allocate. So they have guidelines. So for a regular golfer, 49 and under, it's 150 yards or more on a par 3. For the seniors, juniors, women, it's 130 yards. The reason they do that is for insurance reasons. That's the yardage that makes it not happen as often. So on 15, the ladies teased 100 yards. Well, if they wanted to participate in the hole-in-one contest, they would go from the 130-yard area. So the reason they do it again is that has less hole-in-ones. So we have a WGA, which we have 60 to 100 players, a man, play from the gold tees, which is at the women's at 100 yards. We still don't have many hole-in-ones. I don't think we've had any in the WGA. But the odds get greater for it to happen as it gets closer. So anyway, I was talking to Steve about doing this. I think if we pick 15 and we do the webcam, we do what we want, and then also encourage that, come play Green Spring for a chance to win $2,500 for a hole-in-one. So that's what Swing Kings used, was $2,500. They said that's the number that encouraged people to come from another course or another area. So if they come into town, they're going to put us on the map. So if we control it, we could limit it to 4 hole-in-ones. And 4 hole-in-ones a year, if that's what you chose to do, you're going to risk $10,000. Well, their numbers say that it increases $60,000 to $80,000 by putting that into play. I think that $10,000 at risk is really small. I think we can use the marketing point and get a lot more people. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do. The proposal is $20,000. $4,000 is for the equipment, get everything in place. Like I say, we can limit it to any number. It was just a number we started with, just because we haven't gone to that point to say, do we want to limit it? Do we want to open it up? I mean, I don't think we've ever had 4 hole-in-ones on 15 ever, but we want somebody to get a hole-in-one so that we can advertise with it, but we don't want 10. But anyway, that's what
What
the
does
amount
Swing
is.
Kings do as far as limiting the number?
They don't.
They don't. If you get it, you get it.
Yep, they had one course that put in, and in a month they had 4. Well, Swing Kings pays for insurance, so they don't care. They want you to win it. They want, and it just went through the roof. The TV stations picked it up, everything. Golf course got busier. Swing Kings got some more accounts. So it was a win-win. But again, where we control it, I don't think it's worth even paying for the insurance because we can limit it. I mean, if we get,
Well, what if
you
you
know,
had, what if you had an increasing pot? Like if you took 50 cents out of every fee?
so legally from Utah guidelines, Roger had me look that up. We can't charge any extra money or it goes against,
Okay, so you don't charge extra, you
things.
take 50 cents out, but you've had 6,000 players, that's worth $3,000.
I mean, we could, if you guys wanted to start at a dollar amount, it starts at 1,000 and increases
It would
as we
stop
go.
you from setting a limit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, it could
The pot
also,
could get so big, everybody wants to play.
yeah, it could. I mean, it could get $10,000 at the rate that we're going at. But we still have to pay that out unless we increased our rates. You know what I mean? It's still going to come out of my budget. So we can, but I kind of like to control it a hair. I'd hate that to get to 20 grand and have somebody win and,
The data that tells you that you're sitting in a pretty good spot.
yeah.
And you know what, you may have something fluky happen and you get five or six of them. Boom, boom, boom.
Good. And we can
But
just,
to me, the data says that probably is not gonna happen.
right.
Well,
Yeah,
I would even just say, you know, because I'd hate to say, whoops, we're not gonna do it anymore, because then
Right.
what does that look like to us?
Right, right.
We're gonna approve it, let's approve it for the year.
So
Cross
we,
our fingers that we come out on top.
right. And we can at any given time. I mean, I always think you can turn a negative into a positive. It's all how you swing it, you know, and if we get 4, then guess what? We did 4, you sell that to the world and say, we're going to start that again July 1st, come over and play because we're not that busy in the summer. So if everybody thinks all of a sudden, okay, you know what, we got to get there early because we have a shot for X amount of months, I think we just still create that buzz. And honestly, we don't need it in the February, March, April. But we want everybody to be looking at that webcam over and over and over and over and see it so that when they come down, they just play us. And I hope to do the same marketing in Vegas. You know, we'll do the same thing. And so we have a radio station down there that we're working with and they send people to us. But if we implement this, we just sell that next summer and have these guys come up from Vegas and have their groups come up. We used to get a lot of people from Vegas. When the economy tanked and the prices went down, we don't get near as many. It's starting to get more, but I just think it's, as a marketing tool, I think it can be huge. But I don't think we'll spend, so it's 20,000, but I don't see, and again, we can limit it at any given time, but it's like, what is it, 4,000? It's like 4,000 for the equipment and a year's worth of internet. And that
So that's your
is
sunk
going to
cost.
be
We know that
regardless.
We're gonna at least invest that.
Correct. Yep. And if you guys want to put a limit on something else, we definitely can.
So I wonder, it'd be interesting to know from this other company how many times they get into an issue where there's a controversy. I've heard of stories of people being sued over this
Mhm.
stuff because that's enough money to get a little
So,
weird about it.
so the purpose of it is we have 2 cameras, one at the tee box, one at the green, and it'll videotape it. So it's live feed, it's all the time, they verify it, so nobody's
always go
there.
back and check it. Somebody
Exactly
claimed it,
right.
but I always go back and verify.
Well, I just wonder if that's the benefit of paying them to do it.
So
No,
Council
that's
Ward,
what we were
my brother owns a golf course up in northern
Mm-hmm.
Utah. My brother and sister-in-law, they had one of these contests. And you talk about contests,
Mm-hmm.
there's no rumors. The first time they did it, sure enough, surprise, somebody came off the golf course and said, "Oh, I got it. My 2
Mhm.
witnesses are right here. My drinking buddies, and we all saw it one time." So they didn't have these processes yet. Inflation. They came in and they were
Mhm.
they
Well-
had no idea what to do. It's like, well, I don't know how we refute that. We didn't put the safeguards in place. And
So the safeguards will be in place, it's on camera. I mean, what else do you want? It's on camera at all times. So if you hit a hole in one or somebody comes in and say, we hit a hole in one, all we got to do is go back and look at the camera.
So then.
That's what Swing
again,
King's done also.
Yeah, I just, Well, that's what I'm saying, but you know, all it takes is somebody who, well, I know where your camera is, I park my cart in the way, or I do, you know, I mean,
You
there are-
can't. So, no, the towers, it's on 2 poles, it's up above. I mean, it's not, I mean, you can set it up however you want, but
You have
it's,
a lot more trust in people than I do. I just know people,
If
when there's
s-
money on the line like that, people lay awake at night and doing it. And in some cases, that's the reason why you hand it off to an insurance company and just have them. You get your marketing, you get everything you want to do, and then you just don't have to worry about the hassles, and you get to do what you're good at, which is running a golf course. So I'm just throwing it out there. I think some cases there's hassles and things we get into that.
Yeah, but difference between 20,000 or 15,000 and 40,000 is.
and you're locked into it for
big.
3 years.
Well,
big.
one's,
Yeah.
one's a guaranteed outlay. You know you're gonna
Right.
spend that. This one here says you're only gonna spend it if somebody hits it.
But if somebody came in, you would still see them walking into the camera. If they were to block it, I mean, you got 2 cameras, even if 2 guys were walking, I mean,
So then you have
you-
to specify fairly clearly in your rules that we have to have a
Oh,
completely
definitely.
clear line of sight.
100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah, down on the,
Yeah, this is not gonna be new territory. Like I said, if my brother, the first time he did it, had somebody claim that you go out there and you can find this stuff. There's
Yeah.
rules and my guess is there's some very specific drafted guidelines on
But
this.
I
I do
think,
too. I could just see somebody standing up there, hitting it off the tee, and somebody else up there, you know, with a little.
his twin.
but
rolling
you'll
the-
see
yeah,
all of,
rolling the
you'll
ball
see,
out and
you'll see all of that. It's not going to be that simple.
Just to consider though, I think there's as much incentive as 2,500 is $1,000.
Yeah.
It's a big incentive.
Sure, whatever you
It
think.
might be that you can do it less than you could pay out more if you needed to.
You probably could. I'm just going off of Swing Kings numbers. We can do whatever you guys want. We can limit it. We can not do it. I still want the webcam.
Yeah.
You know, because that's kind of what I want for the marketing. We're adding the hole-in-one because I think it'll bring more money, more people.
Don't forget to
So.
get pictures of those turtles.
There you
On
go.
your live feed camera, you're gonna put a thermometer out there and then it feels like science. It's
We-
115, feels like 80.
So
Yeah.
Steve has talked about doing a lot of stuff with that, with the live feed. Like we have these at where you pay your power and stuff, and it has things. He's kind of wants to incorporate that. So when people are looking at the webcam around the corner, it's throwing out, you know, the marathon or whatever we have going. So he has some big ideas to help market the city. So. But again, we can do any numbers. I'm just throwing out Swing Kings numbers.
I just was going to mention just why he's up here, because we don't get the opportunity to do this very often, but what a great job Kevin has done up there.
It's true.
And I love the marketing concept. I mean, we've not been presented in a long time with a marketing concept there. The course is doing well. The course looks beautiful. And so I do want to take this minute because I don't get enough opportunity to say that publicly, believe what he does. And he's just,
You know,
I
it's
appreciate it
crazy.
too. I almost never get golf balls in my yard.
I've been sitting down here and my world is this, you know, it's the golf course and that's my concern. I'm trying to get people who are doing our stuff. It's so small in relationship to what you guys deal with. It's unbelievable that you even listen to me, that you even let me come up and talk, because it's so pointless in relationship to what the city has to deal with that I just felt like, why am I here?
$20,000 is not.
Yeah.
We're going to listen when you're
What
talking
am I
about
even
that.
doing here? So anyway,
We
appreciate you
loving
listening.
and living within your world and knocking that ball out of the park, not in
Yeah.
my yard.
And Colleen, with your speed limit, man, I agree. I drive up there all day long. I'm 35 and I got people going by me at 70, which I don't know what to do about it, because you can't come through that light and go into one lane or we'll never get through the light. But they are fast.
I'll tell you what I've
Everybody
done
goes fast.
on the number 10 tee box. If they're
Mhm.
going fast, I try and hit them. Tee ball off of them and then try and hit them.
I worry. I actually
Yeah.
go slower till you hit so that you won't hit me with
Yeah.
that ball. Yeah.
I've had a ball bounce right over the top. I would suggest, if we're gonna do it in-house, I would suggest seeing if there's other courses that do it and see if we can learn.
They're not. Nobody's doing it. Swing Kings kind of has the niche, but there's different laws in different states. And from our state laws, we can do it. And so I just figure if we can save the money, we save the money. And if we can control it, we can do like Colleen do. We can do 1,000. If we don't have to do 2,500, that's just their number. And so we can shut it down at any given time, and we have all the flexibility to do whatever we want. If we have into an issue of any kind, I mean, we can switch it or change it or drop it, or, you know, my big thing is the
One
webcam.
on number 11.
Yeah, there you go. If we could videotape that, because,
11.
yeah,
11.
yeah.
Get it? Can you go that far? You can go that far.
We've had,
Let's out the reds.
we've had Dusty Fielding drive that green though,
Yeah, that probably would.
in the
10,000.
whites.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Just stay innovative. It's
Yeah,
really
thank you,
nice
Kevin.
to see it.
Okay, move on to the last item. Are you done, Kimberly?
I'm done if you're done.
Okay, so I think the bottom line was we haven't actually increased the budget.
There are some that, yes, we have.
The mower.
Okay, and so, actually not the mower, it's actually a part of that originally, but so the hole-in-one would be one. The community center has a request for some one-time funding to repair and repaint the fencing around the pool area. And so around the pool area, and then the metal that is where the doors roll up along there that has that south and west facing sun. They'd like to repaint that. The fencing where the sprinklers hit it, it's been rusting away. And so we have to get in and get some repairs on that. But as part of that, what we want to do is alleviate the problem so that we aren't just perpetuating it. And so part of the funding would go towards redoing some of the landscape. So there's the gate that opens up where the mowers actually come in on that side, and the grass kind of gets a little rough right there coming in. And so they're proposing that they kind of pull the grass further in from that, and that area would be more of a gravel with a landscape area. The mowers would still be able to get in, but it would move the water off the fence after we've repaired it and made the replacements and
So
stuff.
where are these additional funds coming?
So these additional funds would come out of the existing budget. So the existing original budget that was proposed had fund balance money that we were sending to fund balance as excess money. It can come out of that. Overall, with the projection though, I still am actually adding more money. So one of the other items on here is another accounting item that has to do with the cost allocations that happen between the administrative costs for the city. So on the original proposal for the budget that was put in, those numbers were based off of the first draft requested budget, and I hadn't moved that along to actual costs of the budget for those things. And so with that correction, if we add that in, it increases revenue in the general fund by $91,000 as well, by just correcting that accounting item over there. So it can all be funded out of existing one-time funds that are in the general fund budget.
So ultimately, just reading your,
So the general fund will go up by $431,000 on the general fund side, and 402 of it is that accounting just for the equipment purchase with the revenue coming in and the revenue going out. And then we also had an increased revenue for the golf course with their marketing, of which Kevin believes they'll have come in as well. So everything that's been proposed in there has a revenue resource, as well as beyond that, to where the appropriated increase to fund balance in the original budget, we're going up by another $123,000 at this point.
Because we're collecting more in sales?
Because of the administrative costs that the other funds are required to pay for their costs of services that I hadn't accounted properly for in the original budget. So there's 91,000 of that that's associated to that.
Out of the
Okay.
other budget.
It's come. Right. And so all you're doing
yeah,
is
really
shifting.
dollars and cents wise.
Dollars and
what are we
cents wise.
talking, 20, we're talking the $20,000
You're,
for the golf.
so my one-time request for that, then you're talking the $20,000 for the golf course, $29,000 for the community center's one-time funding request. The police department has a request to upgrade their body camera equipment. This would include entering into a 5-year lease contract with Axon Enterprises. The annual commitment to that is $18,956. But again, not necessarily an increase to the budget. They are anticipating a $9,000 grant that we could potentially get for that, and they're willing to push off $11,000 of their small equipment requests that they have in their budget this year. And so for that, you would, but the ongoing commitment would be a 5-year at this cost. So I felt we ought to identify that.
A lot of the additional money's coming out of the enterprise funds for administrative.
Only about $40,000 of that is associated. Right. Yeah, so the allocation percents stand true. And what it is that of our service departments that we have, 49% of those costs are distributed outward to other funds. Okay, so all that is holding true. What we did is I just didn't distribute 49% of it, basically, because of the original request to the final request, adopted budget. So I'm just truing it up to actual budget adoption.
So have we reduced the amount of money in reserve by doing this?
No, we're adding to reserves by doing this by $100,000. Well, we can't, well, yeah. So potentially what we're doing is, it depends because we're at our max every year, but the reason we're able to kind of keep adding is because our budget keeps growing and it's a percent of your budget. So basically every year we're hitting that. In order to, we're at 25. So in order to finish out the last fiscal year, we did an additional contribution to the capital project fund to help fund Main Street with part of the excess that was beyond the 25% that we could have. Okay, so we're hitting our max basically every year. So when I originally had these numbers in the budget, again, I don't think at this point those are going to push us over with the growth that we have, but I anticipate again, we're going to hold at our maximum that we have. So, okay. The only other item that most of those things, as you can see too, we did have some rollover expenses that were originally in 2019. When we see these are requests that came in and purchases had gone out prior to June 30th, but they're back ordered and we only have a 60-day window to account for them in the fiscal year. So they're already ordered. They are going to come in, but I need to roll that into the current budget year. So that's what those the ones that say rollover, that's what those are specifically related to. And then you do have an item that's coming before you that we held money in the water fund for, dependent upon that. And that has to do with some water right acquisitions that I believe you guys will be reviewing at your next council meeting. So if that doesn't go, then obviously it wouldn't be spent. But where we were doing a budget opening, we opted to placehold that funding. So. Okay. So that covers it. Okay. So what I included in your packet to make it easier for you was only the accounts that had changes. Okay. So that you weren't getting 48 pages of documents where there really is no change taking place. So in your packet, you have my executive summary that points out these big bullet points, and then you have the individual line item. Right now, the plan is to come in 2 weeks with a public hearing and then the consideration for your approval. When you get that packet, it'll have the resolution and it'll have the full budget of everything. But as you review this over the next couple of weeks, to make it clearer for you, I only included the accounts that have actual changes. So if you have any questions between now and then, just let me know.
Kimberly, just one question, I guess, is with the rollover purchases. So when we finished our budget 2019, were those funds considered spent because those items had been?
No, so
that
basically,
was been money then that was rolled over.
it would roll potentially into fund balance,
So it went into
basically,
fund balance at
right?
that point.
And now we would pull it back out.
So ultimately, what we're doing now is pulling that back out of fund balance to buy.
Right. Yes. but because of where we are, we don't, yeah.
That's,
Yep.
I just want to make sure because that's the way I understood it, saying, well, really it was allocated
Because
here,
we-
so it was spent there, but we're going to report it over here. It's like, that money
Right.
had to go somewhere.
Yeah,
This
so it
day,
didn't get spent and it would just
so it
roll
it went
into,
fund
right,
balance, Now it's coming back and being reallocated.
correct. That's correct. Thank you. These particular items for the most part are enterprise, yeah, so.
Any other questions or comments for Kim? Thank you very much. Okay, item 9, discussion and review. Request to an appointment to the Planning Commission. Ben Martinson's term is up. He has requested to re-up, but as you all know, my philosophy has been 2 terms, and let's let somebody else have an opportunity to serve in our community. So I will not be extending that to Ben. I don't know if you all had looked at any of the applicants. Do you have any comments or concerns or?
I actually didn't see the list of applicants.
You see him, Doug?
So I'm actually still here, Mayor. And
Hello,
I thought you had
Troy.
some pretty good applicants.
I didn't know you went, I thought you went to bed.
Hey, Bill, since the night you woke up,
Oh, heck no, I've been sitting here the whole time trying to listen. I got bits and pieces of the whole conversation, but I didn't get the whole conversation. So,
Well,
Anyway.
I'm entertaining thoughts about a request to be appointed to the Planning Commission.
Is it in tomorrow's agenda?
It is on tomorrow's agenda.
it's in regular meetings.
well, I thought you got some pretty good applicants.
Yeah, they're all really good applicants, so.
Oh, yeah. You messed this up because you didn't put it in order.
My recommendation for tomorrow will be Monty Holly. So think about that, look at that.
I know Monty Holly, he'd be a great choice. Monty's, he and his wife have done a lot for our
He
community.
has been a good friend of Washington City. He has a good construction background. No, I think he works for Westland Construction. So think about that. If you have any questions or comments on it, just call me or let me know.
Are any of these applicants here tonight?
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second,
Turk guy.
Ward, aye.
Granger, aye.
See you tomorrow.
Fellas and I, see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Troy.
He's still on the road.
Yeah, he'll be on.
What's that? 6.
Hey, Matt, can I visit with you a minute?